Oh, hi. I don't really have a video planned for today. I figured we could just make it up as we go, you know? You know what, I keep a list of video ideas that I can just refer to quickly here. What? I don't understand. Long live the king. If there's one word I wouldn't use to describe Borderlands 2, it would be subtle. Borderlands 2 is an amazing game, superior to its predecessor in almost every way imaginable, but it is not a subtle game. It is loud and proud from start to finish. Borderlands 2 cemented the cultural identity of the Borderlands franchise, its art, its humour, its characters, and maybe, most critically, for better and for worse, it introduced one of the most famous villains in all of gaming. But before we get into that, handsome fellow, let's talk about other things, so that I can narratively structure this video to hit you with the more important parts later. We can't jump right into Handsome Jack. I know he's important, I know he makes this game what it is, but there's plenty to talk about when it comes to Borderlands 2 aside from its main villain. Instead, let's start with tradition, at the very beginning. Last time I said that the Borderlands 1 intro was perfect and that they've never topped it, and I stand by that. But the Borderlands 2 intro takes a solid third. We'll get to number 2 eventually, don't you worry. It's a deliberate subversion of the Borderlands 1 intro, obviously. It starts with the Borderlands 1 intro even, until the Borderlands 1 intro is hit by a bloody train. It's funny for one, but it's also the perfect way to introduce this game. It establishes the change in tone and direction before the game even starts. Borderlands 2 is roughly 1 billion times more cinematic than the first game, and symbolically, smashing the first game with a sci-fi train is certainly a strong way to establish that. Speaking of symbolism, the song, Short Change Hero. Like the first game, the opening song is telling you about the plot of the game to come. No Rest for the Wicked was about greed and money, the hustle. Short Change Hero is all about heroes. Who are they? Where do they belong? If Borderlands 1 was about the hustle, Borderlands 2 is about heroes. Not about heroes in a superhero way, more in asking, what is a hero? Borderlands 2, the pre-sequel, and even Tales a little bit focus a lot of their storytelling on that very question. The song itself continues the old with the new blend of No Rest for the Wicked, but in a very different direction. Short Change Hero is a much more down-tempo song. It evokes the soundtracks of Ennio Morricone, the classic western stuff, but it's contrasted against a much more intense introduction. Instead of the sales pitches of the bus ride, we have an actual action sequence where each of the new Vault Hunters shows off their skills in an actual fight, which makes the new art direction clear in multiple ways. Borderlands 1 had good character design, but it was muted. Lots of brown tones, lots of muted colours. Borderlands 2 is colourful, and it wants you to know it. Everything pops. None of the characters are wearing brown. The intro also starts with the actual plot too. Instead of getting off a bus, the train is a trap and Handsome Jack has lured them all there to die, which is, I suppose, enough motivation for the characters to do the rest of the plot. I hope so, because they never speak about it. You pick your character and you wake up in the snow to a familiar face, or at least a familiar shape. All of the Borderlands games officially open with a claptrap introduction and him handing you your UI. It's become a bit of a tradition, but it also makes for a good comparison of the different tone that each game is trying to convey. In Borderlands 1, claptrap was your introduction to the universe of Borderlands. A reminder that we're not doing anything too dark because we have a silly little square robot guy here.
Before continuing, please accept this Echo communication device and heads-up display, provided free of charge by the Doll Corporation.
Borderlands 2 opens by putting Claptrap in the completely wrong place, surrounded by death and using black humour to cope.
Here! Take this Echo communicator that I totally didn't loot from one of these corpses. It comes with a Class 12 heads-up display, complete with a mini-map. Now, come, friend, let's get you inside.
Claptrap was already one of the most talkative characters in the game, but here his dialogue is easily doubled. He's the last Claptrap left alive now, and isolation has clearly driven him a bit batty. He's your companion for the first part of the game, helping you leave the snowy glacier and make it back to civilization. It's quite a chill start compared to the explosive intro. Chill, did you get it? Way. But compared to Borderlands 1, it's a bombastic explosion. It's hard to overstate just how different these two games are when it comes to the script. Borderlands 2 takes a while to get going, but it does in fact get going. You're going somewhere. You're going to a place to meet people to help you stop a bad guy. You're not going to a place to kill a guy and grab a mysterious thing. It has a story. It's been 5 years since the events of the first game, and the Hyperion Corporation have taken over Pandora. After you opened the vault and killed a big monster, the planet cracked, and an alien element called iridium came to the surface. Hyperion apparently came to mine the iridium, but in reality they came to conquer, led by their CEO, a man known as Handsome Jack. Hyperion has also discovered a second vault, which they intend to open. Your characters came on the promise of treasure, but as a player, you know there's probably going to be a big monster in there. Your characters from the last game, as well as most of the NPCs, formed a resistance to Hyperion's occupation. The Crimson Raiders, a ragtag militia made up of remaining Crimson Land soldiers that were left after Nox died and the planet was abandoned by Atlas. That should be enough context that we can take a few detours. Let's talk about jokes.
Shoot me in the face! In the face!
Humour is very subjective, which makes it very hard to analyse critically. What different people find funny is entirely dependent on their personality. So when I say that Borderlands 2 is for the most part a very funny game, that comes with the caveat that some people can't stand this game or this series because of the constant, endless barrage of jokes. Claptrap is make or break for a lot of people, and I'll admit that not all of his quips work for me. Some of them do, like this one.
If I sound pleased about this, it's only because my programmers made this my default tone of voice. I'm actually quite depressed.
And some of them really don't, like this.
If you would, retrieve my eye for me. Oh, and I apologize for saying wall sphincters. I say that a lot when I'm frightened.
The thing is, they come at you so quickly that you don't even have time to decide if it was funny or not before the next joke has started. With Claptrap especially, but the whole game is like that. The humour is constant, and I can see why it really irritates some people who wish the game would just take everything a little bit more seriously. The humour's never bothered me because there's a balance at play, and I think Borderlands 2, more than any other game in the series, bar maybe Tales, nails that balance. The game has to be both funny enough to make you laugh and serious enough that when the bad stuff happens, it doesn't feel completely out of place. The game maintains that balance in two key ways. One is that the main story always takes the threat seriously, even though the main villain is arguably one of the funniest characters in the game, but he's not funny in a way that diminishes his villainy, he's just a snarky asshole. The silliest jokes are left exclusively in the side missions, most of which are references to other bits of media that give you a sigh or a chuckle depending on your personality. Like the mission Splinter Group, which requires you to hunt down a group of mutants in the sewers called Lee, Mick, Ralph, and Dan. Get it?
Is that marshmallows and stag urine I smell? Yummy! Come on in, dude!
The stuff that remains in the main story is either weird humour that's a carryover from the first game, or character humour rooted in the strange personalities of the game. Borderlands 2 has an extremely colourful cast of NPCs, and that's the second key to Borderlands' balance. If the humour is annoying to you, then this doesn't really apply, but if the humour works for you, then it starts to serve a narrative function. It gives you a reason to fight. The weirdness and the silliness of all these different people can become endearing if you let it. Handsome Jack, our villain, his main objective is to kill everyone on this planet and start fresh. Everyone here is a maniac or a criminal, and the universe would be a better place with all of them gone. For a lot of the game, it's easy to see his point. Pandora is filled to bursting with violent murderers and monsters. You have no qualms about killing the bandits, so why should you have a problem with Jack's plan? It's because when he says everyone, he means everyone. The goofy mechanic Scooter, the unlicensed but helpful Dr. Zed, the greedy businessman Marcus, the spiffing adventurer Sir Hammerlock, the sultry barmaid Moxxi, even Claptrap. These aren't good people in the traditional sense of the word. Most of them are criminals on some level, but they're likeable people. Their weirdness is endearing. You don't want to see them all get wiped out. Or you find them and all their wacky antics insufferable, then the game's not going to work for you at all. That is, unless you just completely ignore them, like some people do, because there's plenty on a purely mechanical level to keep you engaged with Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2 plays very similar to the first game. You shoot, you loot, you level up, rinse, repeat. But Borderlands 2 is a better game in almost every way. It's a refinement. It takes all of the ideas from the first game and makes them better, keeping the things that work and improving on the things that didn't. The most notable change is the guns. Visually, it's a drastic improvement on the first game, with every brand having an instantly recognisable look. But mechanically, they're fantastic. Every brand has a unique function. Dahl weapons are burst fire, Jacob's weapons are semi-automatic, Maliwan weapons are only elemental, Vladoff weapons have high rates of fire, the bandit guns have large magazines. There are no normal guns in the game. Every gun you pick up comes with strengths and weaknesses. Elemental effects are the clearest example. They were in the first game too, but less refined. Fire weapons work great against organic enemies, but terribly against shields and armour. For shields you need electric, and for armour you need corrosive. Well, you don't need it, but you definitely don't want fire. You're at disadvantage then. Vladoff weapons have high damage output, but they're terrible at range. At range, you want Hyperion. The minute-to-minute gameplay is all about switching things up, bringing the right tool for the job. With my build in Borderlands, once I got a powerful machine gun, I was set for life. With Roland's ammo regeneration skills, I never even needed to pick up ammo. In this game, you simply can't pick one gun and stick to it. You need to be constantly mixing things up. It gives Borderlands a completely unique rhythm amongst shooters. It's not like a Call of Duty where you pick the gun you like best. It's a game of scavenging and experimentation. Some of the gun combinations might seem useless at first, like a Vladoff fully automatic sniper rifle, but against a slow-moving target, you can deal a lot of damage quickly with that thing. The new gun generation system works in perfect tandem with the revamped skill trees. Far from the first game, the trees are now twice the length and have become way more diverse. If these characters have to stand on their mechanical differences alone, they can take the weight. For some characters, some guns become way more desirable than others. Zero is obviously much better with a sniper rifle than anyone else, and for Gage you really want an automatic weapon. The further you get into the game, the more divergent each character is to play. Each of them has a totally different vibe in combat. Maya starts unleashing wild elemental effects all over the battlefield. Zero becomes a ghost, constantly darting in and out of stealth for wildly powerful blows. And Krieg, oh boy, Krieg along with Gage were initially released as DLC, but in 2021 you're almost definitely buying the Handsome Collection with all the DLC bundled. Krieg is easily one of the most interesting characters to play, but honestly, I'd recommend not playing him on a first playthrough. He's way more complicated to play than anyone else. Krieg is a psycho like the enemies you fight, and a lot of his abilities revolve around getting hurt, including a whole tree that gives you crazy bonuses if you set yourself on fire, which is wild, but all of the characters get wild in their own way. Gage has a tree that totally changes how you play that I cannot in fact use. It's all built around a stacking buff called Anarchy that gives you increased damage and lower accuracy with every kill. It's extremely powerful and can stack up to 999 times. For a 900% damage buff at the cost of having no control where those bullets go whatsoever. But that's fine. You also get a skill that makes bullets ricochet towards enemies. All of the stacks are lost if you prematurely reload, like reload before the clip is empty, which is why I can never use this skill. I am an obsessive reloader. I reload after every kill. I do in every game. I hate not having a full clip. And using Anarchy, I have to consciously avoid reloading the entire time. It's too stressful. But Borderlands 2 has me covered. On another tree you get a skill which gives you health regen when your magazine is full. Suddenly my constant reloading is a strength and not a weakness. Skill trees in Borderlands are all about specialising, and since you can always reset your skill points, you're free to play around. You can spec Maya to be a fantastic support character where her action skill, Phaselock, heals allies and can revive them instantly, and she can provide constant team health regeneration. Or you can spec her to be an elemental goddess with corrosive rounds and flame punches and a Phaselock that spits out elemental damage to everyone around. The interweaving of the different characters' skills and their action skills and all the guns make Borderlands 2 an extremely replayable game. It's not perfect, I don't mean to give that impression, but luckily most of what isn't perfect you can ignore. Most of it. Driving is back, and somehow I think it might actually be worse than the first game. It's clunky and terrible to control, but luckily the machine gun does actually shoot in the direction you're firing now, so that's nice. There's also a new type of gun you can find called an E-Tech gun, and in my experience, these are almost universally worthless. There's a whole mission introducing them where you have to use them, and Dr. Zed is all like, "Oh man, these new E-Tech guns are really cool," and they just aren't. They fire things that aren't bullets, which makes them annoying and finicky, and they use 3 times as much ammo per shot, making them completely useless. But as I say, you can just completely ignore them. The looting is basically identical to the first game, but what's interesting is that it feels different. In the first game, the looting was the point of the game. The most fundamental level of the story was find cool stuff. In Borderlands 2, the looting isn't really what the narrative is about. Instead, the looting is because you need to scavenge for better stuff if you want to win. You're on the back foot, and a rare gun will give you the edge you need to triumph. It's a subtle but impactful difference for how the looting is incorporated into the story. Speaking of the story, should probably finally address that, eh?
It's cute that y'all think you're the heroes of this little adventure, but you're not.
Once you leave the glacier with Claptrap, your goal is to find and join up with the Crimson Raiders, although it's clear they need your help as much as you need theirs, maybe more so, as they seem to be struggling to keep bandits at bay, let alone Hyperion. Roland, the leader of the Raiders, and formerly you, contact you over the radio to say hello, but he's captured before you can meet in person. You make it to Sanctuary, the Raiders' last stronghold, and it's not exactly the welcome you were hoping for. They're leaderless, hopeless, and cowering from the world under a shield with only days left of charge before it burns out. Scooter wants to launch the city into the sky as it's established that the city is built on top of an old Dahl mining ship, but it doesn't seem like that's going to work. Instead, you set off to find the mysterious Firehawk, a bandit-killing mass murderer who is seemingly behind Roland's kidnapping. Turns out, not so much, as the Firehawk is revealed to be Lilith, also you from the last game, and a siren, which I now have to take a second to explain. At any given time in the Borderlands universe, there are 6 women with alien magic powers. Why this is the case has yet to be explained, but it's a thing. Lilith is one, so is Maya, and so was Commandant Steele from the last game. They have some sort of connection to the Iridians, the ancient aliens who built the vaults in the first place. And it's also revealed here that sirens have some sort of connection to Iridium, the weird purple alien element. It supercharges their powers. Lilith attempts to teleport you into the Bloodshot base where Roland is being held, but it doesn't go so well, so you have to break in the old-fashioned way. You might rightly be thinking at this point, wait, I thought the villain of this game was this famous handsome Jack dude I've heard so much about, but all you've done so far is fight bandits. Borderlands 2 loves its twists. It literally has twists on twists. So far, everything in the story has been pretty faithful to the first game, mostly fighting bandits and deadly nature. You've even been guided through the story in the same way by a mysterious guardian angel. There's a lot more happening in the story, that's for sure, but nothing you've done so far would feel out of place in the first game. Hyperion has been talked about a whole bunch, but you've not encountered them since the intro, other than Handsome Jack, who's been calling you over the radio as you go through all this, mostly just to taunt you and make jokes. He's taking a back seat and just kind of observing your progress. Until now. You make it to Roland, and before you can even say hello, his cell wall is immediately broken from the other side as Hyperion robots charge in. He fights a few of them off, but a bigger one grabs him and you have to chase it down. Well, up, as you've been fighting through an old dam this whole time and now you're heading up to the top. Borderlands 2 is also very good at setup and payoff, which is why I'm being a bit too meticulous in this story recap. Most of the things I've mentioned come back later on, and this is one of those. As you fight through the Bloodshot base, their boss, a guy called Flanksteak, is trying to contact Hyperion and sell Roland to them, getting increasingly frustrated that they're ignoring him. Well, here they are. Hyperion's army is here in force to claim Roland, and it's a massacre. The bandits don't stand a chance against the onslaught of robots. This chaos is like nothing you would see in the first game. Comparing it to the introduction of the Crimson Lance is almost laughable, where you just wander into Old Haven and they're just walking around chilling. Hyperion's assault is ruthless and efficient. Their army is entirely composed of these tall, blocky robots called loaders with a design that I absolutely love. And the music. Hyperion is a fantastic villain, from their design to their motivations, and they're a stark contrast to the bandits you've been fighting so far. I think what I love about Hyperion is that unlike the Crimson Lance, it's so clear that you're not fighting a military and a government, you're fighting a corporation. The aesthetic of Hyperion is the most corporate of any of the brands. The sharp edges and sleek designs look like something concocted in a boardroom, and the loaders are no different. They're not designed to look evil. Like if you look at the Crimson Lance, they're all wearing evil stormtrooper helmets, while the loaders almost look a bit silly. They look industrial, like things more designed for lifting crates than shooting guns. The primary Hyperion colour is yellow. If we're talking colours, that's like the least threatening colour there is. Hyperion doesn't have commandants or generals. It has a CEO, and that makes it more dangerous than Atlas ever could be. A military has rules and regulations and orders. A CEO with a robot army can do basically whatever he wants, and he does. Often. Even when you're not directly fighting them, Hyperion looms large over the whole game, both literally and metaphorically. Literally because wherever you are in the game you can see their giant moon base ominously watching you from above, as well as the earthquakes that occur at various points in the story as the Hyperion drills get closer to the vault. Handsome Jack is a constant presence in the story, commenting on the things you're doing, and he keeps mentioning some secret he has.
Oh, and I have decided that I will tell you my secret later on, once you've earned it.
Once you get Roland, it's time to get the vault key, which is apparently being transported by train. The last time you saw the vault key was Borderlands 1, when you handed it to Tannis after the conclusion of the story. How does Hyperion have it now? Well, because Handsome Jack personally tortured its location out of her and pried it from her broken fingers. The train is being tracked by a Crimson Raider scout, who as it turns out is the old you, Mordecai, and to stop the train you'll need the help of a demolitions expert. Enter the other most divisive character in this game, Tiny Tina, the 13-year-old insane explosives expert. If you find the other NPCs and their jokes annoying and frustrating, oh boy.
This here's Mushy Snugglebites, and this is Felicia's Sexopants. These fine-ass women could stop that train for you, but I'ma need their badonkadonks first, and they got stole by the bandits a few days ago. Go get them! Nap time!
Tiny Tina is very loud, very talkative, very unique. You can call her irritating, but you certainly can't call her unmemorable. She helps you blow up the train and go searching the rubble for the key, but it's a trap. You end up having to fight Wilhelm, who's been established by this point in the story as Handsome Jack's top enforcer. At some point before the game started, Jack, along with Wilhelm, destroyed New Haven, the main settlement from the last game, and Wilhelm was able to defeat all 4 of the original Vault Hunters. It gives him quite a bit of heft for a boss fight so early on, especially one that's so piss easy. It's a plot point that always felt a bit off to me, that the new Vault Hunters are, in story terms, way more powerful than the last generation, when in practice that's not really true. They're about equal. There's a cut line of dialogue from Jack that explains this, but it's cut, so non-admissible in court. Defeating an enemy as story powerful as Wilhelm so early in the game is a strange choice. Sort of, because it's what comes next that's the real twist. Wilhelm drops a power core, one that could power Sanctuary's shield possibly indefinitely, and the Guardian Angel reasonably recommends you should take it. Wilhelm, instead of the Vault Key, was a classic bait and switch, but that's only level 1 of our twisty twists on twists. Here's level 2.
What the hell?
Hey, I think it's finally time to tell you that little secret. Angel's working for me.
Lowering Sanctuary's shields, Jack. Executing phase shift.
Top 10 anime betrayals, am I right? This is genuinely an amazing twist, probably the best in the game. It recontextualizes everything you've done so far in this game and the last, and at least the first time I played, I was completely blindsided by it. Angel has been extremely helpful to you in this game. She has seemingly helped you do damage to Jack's operations, and Jack has shown no sign whatsoever that he knows about Angel. And yet it doesn't come out of nowhere at all. In fact, it's very heavily foreshadowed if you know what to look for, like how Angel needs a Hyperion device in order to hack the vehicle station, because she's a Hyperion AI linked to the Hyperion network. She said at the very start, you're alive for a reason, and you are. You're alive because Jack wanted you to be. It's a perfect mid-game twist. You just delivered the death blow to your new allies, and you didn't even realise it. It could have been the end of the Resistance had they not had a few tricks left up their sleeve. Remember when I mentioned that Sanctuary was built on a ship?
Man, this is one of them moments. Catch a ride!
That's the best you got. A flying city? What did your jumps possibly have that makes you think you've got a chance against me? A siren sucks.
Scooter gets the city up in the air, and Lilith teleports it to safety by harnessing the power of Iridium. Set up, payoff. It's arguably the most iconic moment in the game, and you couldn't pick a better scene to symbolically represent the Borderlands vibe. A floating city being bombarded by a moon base. It could be ridiculous, it should be ridiculous, but instead it's tense. Will our plucky ragtag rebels make it out of this situation? The mission is called Rising Action, and it couldn't be more correct. If a city just took off, where the hell is the story going next? The next mission is a chill one as you move forward, trying to get back to Sanctuary. Angel calls you throughout, still offering help and an explanation for what's going on. And it's at this point we need to pivot from one of the best points in the game to one of the game's biggest flaws. Borderlands 2 has a great story, it really does, but anchoring the story is you. A total void of personality that people talk at instead of talk to. I've said many times now that I don't like silent protagonists, and Borderlands 2 might be the worst example I've ever seen. Borderlands 1's silent protagonist worked because Borderlands 1 didn't have a story that needed a character. It wasn't character-driven storytelling, it was stuff-driven storytelling. It was okay that Roland or Brick or Mordecai or Lilith never spoke up because they never had to. The story was about rolling through the wasteland collecting stuff. You don't need a personality to do that. Borderlands 2 is extremely character-focused. The main drive of everything that happens in the game is the rivalry between your character and Handsome Jack, and it's just a completely one-sided rivalry. Jack taunts you all game long, and your character just takes it. They took the time to name, create, and plot out personalities for all of these interesting characters, and then they just don't use them at all. It's a baffling creative decision, especially when you consider how the previous game's protagonists are used. Mordecai, Lilith, Roland and Brick all come back for important roles in this game, critically important in fact, and they're good. They're good characters. It's just that a lot of this game ends up being about the conflict between your nemesis and the people you were playing as in the last game, with you as a tool in the middle. It's so strange. How did they understand that it would be a waste not to flesh out the last game's characters while also making the exact same mistake with the next generation? I want to know what Maya thinks about this, what Axton has to say about that, by God, what Krieg has to say about anything, or what people think of them in return. It seems like madness that they didn't. It hits its crux at this point in the story. You have no reason to trust Angel anymore. She knows it, you know it. But you have to go along with it anyway because the quest marker tells you to. More than any other point, you need a character here to voice this frustration, to have an argument about it, to be convinced. How do they not realise that? Well, a few years after the game came out, Anthony Birch, lead writer of Borderlands 2, wrote an article for Kotaku about this very subject, and it's a fascinating read. The article, titled "We Were Wrong to Make Borderlands 2's Heroes So Quiet," details Birch's reasons for why they made the game's protagonist silent, and why he now realises it was a mistake. It's fascinating because, as it turns out, what I always thought was a budgetary sacrifice, that voicing 6 characters across the game and voicing other NPCs' different lines towards them would be far too expensive and time-consuming, was actually a concrete creative choice that Birch fought for against the feedback of focus testers. He writes, "This minimalist style of characterization worked for Half-Life, it worked for Bioshock, and even though your characters only kind of sort of talked in Borderlands, they never commented on the plot, it worked there too. So when I was tasked to help write Borderlands 2, there wasn't even a question in any of our minds. Just do what we did last time. I personally preferred silent protagonists to talkative ones, but that's only because, I was smart and everyone who disagreed was stupid." 2 years later, creative director Paul Helquist and I sat down with a focus group and listened to them spend roughly 45 minutes talking about how bullshit our main characters were. This came as a surprise. Isn't it better that apart from shouting, "It's like having 3 dicks," when he pulls out a second assault rifle, Salvador the Gunzerker never says anything at all about the plot? Isn't it better that you get to decide how you feel about the events of the story? Now, I don't need to sit here and argue with the guy. He agrees with me, which is why the pre-sequel takes a hard shift in the opposite direction. But it's wild to hear that the writers genuinely felt this made the story better, that immersion was ever something they should be trying to achieve. Especially since, if anything, the protagonist's steely silence makes for a less immersive experience. For example, in an early side mission you restore power at the Happy Pig Motel with the help of Scooter after its inhabitants had been murdered. At one point, he jokingly condescends you for your lack of technical know-how.
I see your problem, and I'm gonna take this slow so as you can understand, alright? That thing's broke as hell.
However, on this playthrough, I chose Gage, an 18-year-old mechanical genius who can summon a killer death robot. The fact that a teenage savant doesn't call out someone for thinking they know more than her is, quite frankly, unbelievable. But more importantly, just a huge missed opportunity. This could have been a fun character moment where more is revealed about what sort of person you're playing. Are they going to take Scooter's jabs? Are they going to get mad at him? Are they going to fire back with more knowledge on the subject than even he has? Instead, we get steely silence. The story of Borderlands 2 still works, and ultimately I do still enjoy the game and everything it has to offer. It just feels like it's missing something, especially as I play it again now with the knowledge that the sequels would do just that. The saving grace is that Borderlands 2 is a video game, and so there's another aspect to the story that has to be considered. The things you actually do in it. A silent protagonist is only really possible in the medium of video games. Even if a character never speaks in a movie or book, a lack of characterization is impossible to show. In a game, however, the story is driven by what you do more than what you say. And like I said, the story of your nemesis versus the people you played last game is still a good one. Angel proves herself still an ally by helping you get back to Sanctuary, to the annoyance of Jack, and then she lays out your next objective, the real location of the Vault Key. She has it in her AI control core, and in its way are 3 levels of impenetrable security. A wall only accessible by Hyperion personnel, a bunker of Hyperion's most expensive and advanced weaponry, and a door that will only open to Handsome Jack. One problem at a time. Roland's got a lead on the wall. He reckons Claptrap will be able to get through it as long as he can get an upgrade. Mordecai was able to procure one, but it and his gender-fluid pet bird, Bloodwing, were stolen. Mission 1. Head out to the Wildlife Exploitation Preserve and rescue Bloodwing. Yes, you heard right. This is the place where Hyperion's performing horrific slag experiments on animals. And people. It's not really a twist who the final boss of this location is. Mordecai was pretty chill about the whole kidnapping thing, but he's getting pretty flustered by this boss fight. You manage to take the bird down without killing it, but then Jack blows its head off just because he can and drives Mordecai into a frenzy.
Hey, assholes! Screw you! Screw you! Venga Diablo, you sons of bitches! Dirt!
This whole bit really helps demonstrate what I mean when I say the game's more about the people you were playing last game as opposed to you. The player characters have no emotional attachment to Bloodwing, they've barely met her. Mordecai does, though. Jack just murdered his best friend, and your action skill if you played Mordecai last game, it's a successful emotional beat and character motivation for the guy you were playing last time. Angel's betrayal means more to them than it does to you. Angel was the reason they opened the vault in the first place. I think it's the closest the game has ever come to being a second-person story. There are so many points where you have to ask, why am I not just playing these people again anyway? If the story's going to pivot around them, why am I not controlling them instead of these new people? The reason for that is gameplay and marketing, obviously, but it's a bad question to be asking. Anyway, Claptrap upgrade secured. Step 2. We're gonna need more guns. Roland sends you with a message to meet the Slab King, a bandit leader who used to be part of the Crimson Raiders but was kicked out for being too violent. Plot twist? It's Brick, and the old gang's finally reunited. Step 3, the door that will only open for Handsome Jack. Angel has a plan. You'll need a voice modulator and a bioscan thingamajig. And to do that, you need to head to Opportunity and kill one of his body doubles. Opportunity is my favourite location in the game. It's in a totally different sphere of design from the rest of the game. It's a clean and polished glass metropolis, so new it isn't even finished yet. It's the future for Pandora that Handsome Jack wants to build. Clean, comfortable, and extremely corporatized. At first, depending on your personal aesthetic, this either looks like progress or hell, but the more you learn about it, the more it seems like hell. This place is a message. It's the beginning of what Jack wants to do to all of Pandora. Turn it into a glossy, shiny shrine to his own ego. The plan is, gather the richest families in the universe to live here as a sign of how safe and secure Pandora has become. He's even planning to pay people for living here, where they can live there and be happy and worship him like a god. It's specifically a city for the galaxy's elite. There's an audio log you can find where he tells the builders that they won't actually be allowed inside the city when they're finished working on it. The city is a message, a giant shiny middle finger to the denizens of Pandora. In another one of the audio logs, a discussion between Jack and one of the builders, Jack says this outright.
But why would you build a metropolis in the middle of a bandit-infested wasteland? I don't understand, sir. Of course you don't, because you're as lacking in vision as you are in brain cells. You don't do things because they're easy, you do them because they're right. But, sir, that still didn't really explain anything. Opportunity is the tip of the spear, people. The future is coming to Pandora, and opportunity is the bright, shining beacon of that future. Bandits will look up from their baby meat stew and see our city shining in the distance. A symbol of safety and peace and order. First opportunity, then the rest of Pandora.
Around the same time, you get access to a different area, side quests only, but it's equally important and it works as a great dark reflection of opportunity. Lynchwood, a western-themed town full of bandits and ruled over by a violent sociopath known only as the Sheriff. Naturally, she's Jack's girlfriend. Lynchwood couldn't seem further from Opportunity at first, but in reality, it's just a more honest version of what Opportunity is. There's 283 laws in Lynchwood and all of them are punishable by death. Seems extreme, except...
You know littering in Opportunity is punishable by death? If not, you also ought to know complaining about Opportunity's laws is considered verbal littering.
Lynchwood is grimy, mucky, and ruled by an iron fist by a literal puppy killer, but functionally, it's exactly the same as Opportunity, just more honest about it. I think it's finally time to dive in and talk about the big man himself. Who is Handsome Jack, and what makes him so brilliant? Well, to put it simply, he's an egomaniacal sadist with a near infinite money and a thirst for innocent blood. He's also charming, extremely charismatic, and honestly, hilarious.
Man, example, this one guy in New Haven, right? City's burning, people are dying left and right, yada yada yada. This jackal rushes me with a spoon. A freaking spoon, and I'm dying laughing, right? So I scoop out his stupid little eyeballs with it, and his kids are all, wah! And I can't even, he can't see where he's going, he's bumping into stuff, and anyway, I don't know, maybe he had to be there. The moral is, you're a total bitch.
He's a successful execution of a character trope that's very hard to pull off. A likeable asshole. Not likeable in a way where you want redemption for him. He's a horrible monster who needs to be stopped. A lot of that credit has to go to his voice actor, Damien Clark, who voices Jack with so much talent that he elevates what is functionally an extremely hard character to pull off to perfection. He makes Jack what he is. In the last video, I had a lot of love for General Knox, the grumpy and tired big bad of Secret Armory. He was a guy who was likeable in a normal sense, whereas Jack is the guy you love to hate. He's always 2 steps ahead, he undermines you at every turn, he punctuates important plot beats and character moments with stupid jokes to make them hurt even more.
Alright, sweet. Found it. Alright, this is a song for Mordecai's stupid bird. Annie. Alright, you know what? Screw you. It would have been hilarious if I found it earlier. Shut up!
He's so proud of himself, so secure in his victory that he let you kill one of his best guys just so he could knock the wind out of you a few moments later. By the point you finally reach him, you can't wait to punch his teeth out. A very early side mission gives you a lot of insight into the type of person Jack is. It's a series of audio logs chronicling the fate of Helena Pierce, the leader of New Haven from the last game. She was on her way to Sanctuary when Jack caught her. He made a personal appearance along with Wilhelm to taunt them, and he takes a second to laugh hysterically at her messed up face.
Okay, how about this? Lady, I don't even know what to call you. You tell me why you look like you headbutted a belt sander, and I'll let all you go right now.
He forces an explanation out of her, and after listening to the sad tale, shoots her in the head before having Wilhelm gun down the rest of the refugees.
Oh, holy crap! Did you see her head? It was like... Oh my god! Wilhelm, kill these savages. Understood!
It's an undignified way for Pierce to go. She wasn't much of a character in the first game, admittedly, but she was a memorable one of the only truly good people on Pandora, and Jack laughs as he shoots her brains out. He's not too dissimilar to you in that way. Borderlands 2 is obsessed with the idea of heroes, what they are, who gets deemed as such, and no one is more emblematic of that than Jack himself, because Jack is a villain with a hero complex. The old saying goes that everyone is the hero of their own story, but this isn't that. Handsome Jack is obsessed with the idea that he's a hero, the hero. It's his justification for every cruel thing he does. Take a second to question why Jack cares so much about Pandora. Why does he want to awaken a big monster to wipe everyone out and pave over it with a shiny utopia? The Borderlands universe is unfathomably large. People talk casually about travelling across galaxies. Why does he care so much about Pandora, this backwater nowhere? It's like if Elon Musk was super obsessed with conquering a completely unlivable desert on another oh wait, that's real! I forgot. Life imitates art. Why he's obsessed with Pandora is basically the thesis question of the pre-sequel, but Borderlands 2 throws in its own answer. He's obsessed with Pandora because Pandora is a place where he can be a hero. Pandora is a place where his cruelty can be justified because it's against people he believes deserve it. That's why he's so insistent that you and your friends are criminals and bandits. He genuinely believes that, and because that's true, that, in his mind, justifies the death, the manipulation, and the torture. He's already done horrific things in this story, and somehow the worst is still to come, but he believes in himself. He truly believes that he is the hero. He believes it so hard that he's convinced a bunch of people that it's true. And we'll get to you, Matt Pat. Unfortunately, unpacking that requires a lot of back knowledge from the pre-sequel, so we're going to shelve that one for now. Jack isn't doing this out of greed, out of a sheer love of violence, or even to help anyone. The reason he's doing all of this is to vindicate his own belief that he's a hero. He also has a deep need for validation, as seen with Opportunity, but also with how he talks to you. The fact that Jack talks to you all the time isn't an accident. He's trying to convince you that he's right. Especially in the early game, he's constantly pointing out the flaws on Pandora, pointing out how much better he can make things. He wants validation from you. When people don't give him that validation, that recognition, he snaps and he lashes out. You hear it a lot on the echologs you find about the place. That is the fundamental difference between the good guys and the bad guys. The Crimson Raiders are not great people. They're all murderers and thieves and convicts, but they're not fighting for themselves. They could, after all, just leave. It's a big galaxy. They're fighting because they want to protect people, to protect each other. Any cruelty Jack does, he justifies to himself because he knows he's doing the right thing, and people who don't see that are too stupid to live and probably evil themselves. And speaking of justifying cruelty, let's get back on track. Time for the assault on Control Core Angel. Claptrap gets you through the death wall, Brick helps you fight the bunker, which as it turns out is no mere building, and you make it through the door with the Jack voice and its 3-word password. I love you. There's a shift in Jack. He's tense, scared, worried. He begs you not to enter the room, because it's time for Twisty Twist level number 3.
To truly stop Jack from waking the warrior, you cannot just steal the vault key. You must destroy his catalyst. You must destroy
me.
Angel is not an AI, she's a siren, a girl locked in a tiny cage forced to do Jack's bidding, which is bad enough on its own, but even worse when you consider Twisty Twist number 4.
You get the hell away from my daughter!
That's our 4th twist on the same line now, which I believe means we've officially made a square. Both of these twists are also foreshadowed if you know what to look for, but only if you know what to look for, which is what makes this game extra rewarding to replay. Whenever Angel hacks something across the story, she announces executing phase shift. It's a meaningless term until you realise that Lilith's power is called phase walk, and Maya's power is called phase lock. Phase is a signifier of siren powers, clearly, but until you know Angel's a siren, that's just a coincidence. The second is that throughout the story, Angel continually stops herself from swearing when frustrated. Setup.
Son of a witch.
Payoff.
Stop it, you piece of...
Language?
If manipulating you, killing Bloodwing, torturing Tannis, if none of that got you to hate Jack, this twist cements any doubts you may have. In order to open the vault, Jack needs to charge the key, and to do that he needs 2 things, Iridium and a siren. For years Jack has been powering Angel with Iridium to charge the vault key, to the point that her body has become reliant on it. If you pull that plug, she'll die. And she wants you to do it anyway because she's sick of helping him, and this is the one good thing she can still do. He feels no guilt about this whatsoever. You may be the one who pulls the plug, but killing Angel is not your fault. It's his. He locked his daughter in a tiny room and pumped her so full of dangerous chemicals that her body has become addicted to a constant supply of them, all the while forcing her to do his bidding. He may as well have killed her. But he never considers that. He can't even comprehend that what he's done to his daughter is awful and exploitative and manipulative. For the rest of the game, he calls you child-murdering psychopath. Right up until the very end, he insists upon it. Even his own daughter's death is about him. With her last words, she calls him an asshole, but now he's on a righteous quest for vengeance for his baby girl. Never mind what she actually wanted, because he never cared about what she actually wanted, he cared about what she could do for him. With Angel dead, Jack makes his first in-person appearance, and it's certainly a memorable one.
She's dead. Jack just lost his only way to awaken the warrior. We got the vault key, but this isn't over yet. We gotta find Jack and take him out. Lilith, take the vault key to Tannis. I'm going after Jack. Son. You bastard! I'm gonna...
Language? What's that saying? Don't pick a fight with a man with nothing left to lose. See, I'm gonna show you just how much you have to lose, and I got the most powerful siren on the planet to do it with. Lilith, kill the Vault Hunter. We've got a date to keep with the warrior.
Jack shooting Roland isn't a twist in the same way, though it is foreshadowed in a frankly hilarious way in a second playthrough. Subtle. It's not a twist, but when I first played the game, I distinctly remember the odd feeling that Jack had broken the rules. Roland was a player character. He can't die. He's me from the last game. Now you can nitpick this scene to hell if you want to. Why doesn't my guy shoot him during this scene? Where did Jack get his siren control collar? Why doesn't Roland have a shield equipped? Or the classic, why does Jack allow you to use the respawn machines? And the answer to that last one is because it's funny and they're obviously not canon. For the rest, it's because it's an essential plot beat. At this point in the story, the bad guy needs a win, and Roland has served his narrative function already. From this point onward, it has to be you versus Jack. Nobody else in the way. Except, you can't talk. So you head back to Sanctuary and Brick and Mordecai formulate a plan. And we get what has to be the most pointless main mission in the game. You need to figure out where the new vault is and track down Jack and Lilith. The place to do that is the Hyperion Info Stockade, so Mordecai sends you out there. However, the bridge is locked down, so you need to go to another place to grab some bombs so Brick's guys can blow up the bridge. It's a bit of artificial inflation that stands out so much at this point in the story. It's a real narrative deflation. The area you go to, Sawtooth Cauldron, is gigantic and full of bandits. Mechanically, it's the bandit climax, the last time you fight this group of enemies in the story, but narratively, it's so weak and so out of place. It's a beat to stop and think about what just happened, maybe, but there's a side mission that does that much better, a simple one where you go around town and give people the bad news, and the mission after this one is a much better quiet beat anyway. Every time I play this game, I forget about Sawtooth Cauldron. It's such a forgettable mission, and the story would flow so much better if it just wasn't there at all. Because the Info Stockade is built right on top of Firestone, the town where you started the first game. It's the only returning location from the first game, and yes, I know what you're thinking, it is very similar to the end of Claptrap's New Robot Revolution. Only this time it actually works, and isn't a really bad joke. Firestone has been scarred. There's pools of purple iridium slag everywhere, and the denizens have been replaced with loaders. An audio log reveals Jack chose the location intentionally. It's symbolic of where it all began for the Vault Hunters, and he wanted a show of strength that he's ruined it. They cannot protect Pandora. It's a smaller, quieter location to think about what's happened so far, much better than Sawtooth Cauldron. What Jack did to Angel, that's what he's doing to all of Pandora, abusing it, controlling it, twisting it and hurting it. All the way back in the first video, I said that Pandora itself was the villain of that game. Well, here we are at the end of Borderlands 2, and Jack is rubbing it in that he's beaten it. He's conquered this place, and he's so confident in this fact, he's planted his information base right on top of where it all began. You get the location of the vault and you head to the end. Mordecai and Brick help you fight your way there, but they're taken down before the end. The final fight is between you and Jack alone. Jack takes a swing at you first, but you take him out easily. However, the key is charged and he releases the warrior. Mechanically, I've always thought the warrior is a bit of a boring boss fight, but narratively, it is the climax you knew was coming. When it's defeated, Jack is alone, on the back foot and screaming his last words, insistent to the very end that he's the hero and you're nothing but a bandit.
No, I can't die like this. Not when I'm so close. And not at the hands of a filthy bandit! See, I could have saved this planet. See, I could have actually restored order. And I wasn't supposed to die by the hands of a child-killing psychopath! You're a savage! You're a maniac! You are a bandit! And I am the goddamn hero!
You can kill him yourself, or you can let Lilith do it. Seems fair to let her do it, given that the story is the whole characters from the last game are actually the main characters thing. Brick and Mordecai reveal they're okay, and the Vault Key spits out a sequel tease. Roll credits. But not before a cheeky reference to the start of the first game, just to bring us full circle. It's a strong end to a strong story, but I still kinda wish I was playing the main character.
You know what that means.
Yeah. No rest for the wicked.
So far I've centred a lot of this analysis on Handsome Jack. Most people do, because it's easier, it's more direct, and he's a fascinating character to dissect. But at the end here, I want to switch tacts. There's another story being told here, and it has an interesting intersection with a point I made in my last video. Borderlands and its issues with ableism. I pointed out the issues with the language used in that game and the thematic problems with using disabled and mentally unstable people as cannon fodder in the game. And while the language is certainly still a problem in this game, in fact, it may even be worse, Thematically, Borderlands 2 offers a much deeper answer than I had remembered. There's one more part of Handsome Jack that I haven't mentioned, mostly because it's subtextual rather than textual, and it's about his name. Handsome Jack. Handsome Jack is vain. He wants things to be pretty and perfect, especially himself. He's built his entire identity around being handsome, and yet, it's a lie. There's another reason that scene with Helena Pierce on the train is so important. He laughs and mocks her deformities, despite being exactly the same. His face is fake. He's wearing a mask. Underneath, he's horrifically scarred. He's missing an eye, and the vault symbol, that upside-down V that pops up all over the series, has been burned into his face. It's never directly brought up in-game. You might not even notice it if you don't sit and stare at his body, but symbolically, you don't get clearer than this. Borderlands 2 does not fix the ableist language, but thematically it offers the argument that nobody is normal. We're all damaged in our own unique ways. There are no normal NPCs, not even the generic people walking around Sanctuary are normal. They're depressed, they're going a bit loopy, they're just plain weird sometimes if you sit and talk to them. Everyone has their unique flavour of weird. Ellie is extremely overweight. Sir Hammerlock is missing an arm, a leg, and an eye. Tiny Tina is Tiny Tina. She's a jokey character, but if you read between the lines, she's clearly got some form of ADHD. Tannis from the first game is more clearly revealed to be somewhere on the autism spectrum. Even the old Vault Hunters are fleshed out in this way. Mordecai has a serious drinking problem that gets worse when Bloodwine dies. Brick is extremely violent, dangerously so given his strength, a point which the Sheriff of Lynchwood brings up.
I hear that after Brick escaped our custody, he tracked down the guy who betrayed New Haven to Hyperion. Somebody named Shep Sanders. Brick gouged his eyes out with his thumbs and cracked his skull open like an egg, all while poor Shep screamed for mercy. Her friend Roland kicked him out of Sanctuary after that. You all had to treat your different with bandits.
I mean, you's killed his dog, lady. What did you expect? Even Roland, who seems like the primary candidate for normal guy, is shown to be repeatedly socially inept, incapable of switching off his commander mode. More so than even the people, though, it's Pandora itself that's broken. It's been beaten and abused both by Hyperion and those who came before, Atlas and Dahl. When Sanctuary takes off, it opens up a massive hole in the ground. The Caustic Caverns, Dahl's old mines. There's a couple of side quests down there, one of which is to find the ecologues detailing the history of chrysalisks, these big three-legged crystal things. Initially they were friendly, but they were also valuable, so the Dahl Corporation ordered them hunted down. When the security team refused, they were gunned down too. With this act of violence, the chrysalisks turned on the miners and killed them all, remaining untrusting and hostile to all humans to this day. In another mission, you push an old minecart through the area as Tannis gives you some history. She has a fantastic line about all this.
The bandits you fight out there used to be family men, workers, scientists. We're all broken because of them.
Handsome Jack explicitly wants to fix all of this. He wants to pave over all of the cracks and bruises of the planet with a glossy sheen. He wants everything to be perfect. By fighting him, you're saying, no. You're fighting to protect this planet and its people and all their imperfections. You're saying that just because something is broken, that doesn't mean it's worthless. The vault symbol across Jack's face is about as direct as you can get. It's an exact echo of the iconic Psycho masks with the vault symbol across the face. But Jack rejects that part of him. To Jack, imperfections are ugly and deserve to be destroyed or hidden away. What he did to himself, he wants to do for all of Pandora. Your objective is like this side quest from Ellie. The bandits have made hood ornaments making fun of her weight, but she likes who she is. So she sends you out to kill them and grab the ornaments so she can decorate her garage with them. She's proud of her imperfections. The analogy isn't perfect, and the game gets quite problematic and uncomfortable sometimes, with 2 separate missions where you help Scooter make unwanted advances on women coming to mind especially, both of which end with the lady's death because they want to avoid him. And there's still the language issue too, with the worst example being an early side mission to kill a Mr. Midgemong. Enough said, really. It's messy, but I think overall it works, and the game, despite all its silly jokes, all its immature tendencies, is a more mature game than the first, and a much more meaningful one. Borderlands 2 is a fantastic game. It looks amazing, and especially with the remastered graphics it always will. It plays amazing, But more than anything else, it feels amazing. It's one of the only games I know which can make you laugh and make you cry in equal measure and never feel out of place in either scenario. It also set a new standard. Borderlands 2 blew the original game out of the park, and living up to the high standards set by this game would become a constant struggle for everything going forward, even the game's own DLC.
Legends speak of Captain Blade's lost treasure of the sands, of a prize so great that men would turn the sands red in pursuit of it, of a pirate queen, courageous and deadly, who would stop at nothing to find it.
Well, we've established this new standard for Borderlands. Bigger stories, bigger stakes, bigger laughs, bigger cries. Where do we take this game now? I mean, obviously the answer is sand pirates. What? Why aren't you applauding the brilliance yet? Captain Scarlett and her pirate's booty, yup, that's really what it's called, is definitely a strange place to start after the base game. More than anything because sand pirates is just a strange concept to base a whole DLC around. The first DLC last time was zombies, and sure, I don't like them, but I get it. There's a lot of media and tropes and expectations you can draw from and parody when it comes to zombies. But sand pirates? I mean, if you're gonna step to the king, you better come out swinging.
Insolence! We are pirates! We don't even know what that means!
Pirate's booty does not come out swinging. Instead, it comes out with Shade. Shade is the first character you meet in the DLC, and he's a weird note to start on. He's the last survivor of a dried up beach resort town called Oasis, and he's clearly suffering from severe dehydration. He's also about one step away from being an actual serial killer. He develops an instant clawing obsession with you because you're a real person. You know, unlike the corpses he's put up around town with voice recorders of himself putting on voices that he's normally friends with.
I am a tough man who says tough things in a growly voice. I can...
Tape corrupted.
You have a problem, Frank. You are so drunk you are speaking the gibberish. Please return to me, friend. Poor Frank is beyond help.
He traps you in town a little bit longer by sabotaging the sand skiff, but eventually you're able to leave his creepy town of corpses and move on with the actual plot. You're here searching for the lost treasure of Captain Blade, along with everyone else in the area, especially Captain Scarlett, a charming and friendly captain who's very forthcoming about the fact that she's definitely going to betray you for the treasure. Captain Blade left a compass that will point to the location of the treasure, but it's split into 4 pieces that you'll need to go find. Once you meet Captain Scarlett, the DLC does admittedly pick up. Captain Scarlett is a fun character, and she definitely gets the best lines in the DLC.
Wondering why I'm sending you to kill Sandman rather than do it myself? First of all, good question. Glad to see you, taking the initiative. Second of all, Sandman's pretty strong and you're expendable as hell, so good luck.
The thing is, she's a fine character, but the pirate theme seems so arbitrary. She would work just as well, maybe even better, as a Han Solo type space treasure hunter. Aside from visuals, she's not got much pirate stuff going on. She's not exactly speaking in the pirate voice or raiding the British Navy. And the whole DLC is like that. The pirate aesthetic seems so random and out of place. Borderlands has a lot of Western influences, but they've always been limited to influences. The closest they got to actually emulating Western aesthetics was Lynchwood, and even then that was mostly the sheriff. There is some crossover between cowboys and pirates that go beyond both being popular Halloween costumes. They both have the same sort of cultural symbolism of cool outlaws living out on the frontier, free from rules and regulations, man. So I can see, maybe, how they arrived at the idea of pirates. Or there's a much simpler explanation. I know 2012 was like 2 trillion years ago, so it can be hard to remember. But at the time it was pirate mania. Pirates of the Caribbean was still in the prime of its popularity. Assassin's Creed 4 was about to come out. It was pirate season, me hearties. Which is I think how they arrived at sand pirates, as a way to creatively distinguish themselves from all the other pirate media going around. Sand pirates is certainly unique amongst pirate media, but for Borderlands, Borderlands has already done so much desert. What it hasn't done, even to this day, is water. The area that this DLC takes place in is a dried up ocean bed, which is kinda cool, but that's not even new for the series. The secret armory of General Knox was also built around a dried up ocean bed. It's not as if they were forced to set it in the desert. Pandora isn't a desert planet, it has water. Plenty of water, it has oceans. If they wanted to do pirates, they could have done pirates. Instead, they have all these bandits reskinned with pirate hats and swords and anchors in the middle of a desert, and it just feels really weird and out of place when coming from the base game. If the rest of the planet dresses normally, why do these guys and nobody else dress like pirates? It's unique, but unique doesn't make it good. I don't think the pirate angle would have bothered me at all if they'd actually set the DLC on the high seas. But they didn't. I mean, I'll give credit where it's due though. When Gearbox commits to an idea, they commit. All of the pirates look great. There's loads of new enemy types to deal with, including the most annoying type ever introduced, the cursed pirates who leech health off you when they hit you. The dried up seabed of this DLC is much more committed to the idea than Secret Armory, with all these big dead corals and bones of big sea creatures and the switch from cars to sand skiffs, which feel very Star Wars. It's good work. It just feels like out-of-place work. We have a long tradition of cool space cowboys. You can make a cowboy hat work in space, unless you're Jeff Bezos. I think that's mostly to do with time. Cowboys and that style of fashion isn't that old, relatively speaking. People still dress like this. You can pull it off. You don't see a lot of tricorns out on the streets anymore. That's an era of fashion that hasn't lasted. Star Wars can pull it off because Star Wars is basically fantasy. Borderlands is much more sci-fi, even though it does have some magic-y type things going on. The art team is good, they can make space pirates look neat, but they can't make them look like an actual part of the Borderlands universe. I think I've harped on about the weird choice of pirates for long enough now. Let's get back to the story. You meet up with Scarlett. She has a piece of the compass already, and she sends you off to get another piece that's in the hands of her old partner, Sandman. He set up his base in an underground reservoir, much to the shock of Mr. Not Dying of Thirst Shade, who's hacked into your UI, by the way. Sandman also has a clue towards the third piece. Hyperion's got it. Hyperion's presence in this DLC is so tangential, and I'm pretty sure they're only there to give you a break from fighting the pirates constantly. They're an extremely minor part of the DLC, but boy do the loaders clash extra hard with the whole pirate thing. 3 of 4 pieces acquired, Scarlett sends you to find the guy who may know where to find the 4th, an old hermit named Herbert. Enter creepy weirdo one step away from serial killer number 2. I'm detecting a theme. A weird, uncomfortable theme. Herbert is an old weirdo obsessed with Captain Scarlett. He has a creepy shrine to her in his house, and before he'll give you the location of the last piece, he wants you to go and retrieve his creepy echo logs, which include a clip of Scarlett snoring,
This concludes the sounds of Scarlett sleeping. Tape number 48.
and his creepy attempts at poetry.
You got a nice butt. You also got a nice chest. Your face is okay too. No! 6 syllables! Oh, it's ruined! God damn it!
Did you get it yet? That this guy is a creepy weirdo? When you return his creepy things back to him, Herb reveals that he has the last piece of the compass in this box, but the lock's broken. Naturally, you shoot it, which breaks the last piece of the compass. No worries, Herb can probably make a replacement if you head to the nearby Hyperion refinery and grab some polycraton. Sure. So you do that, and you fight through a huge base of Hyperion robots and bring it back to Herbert so he can make a new one. Before you left, Scarlett gave you a gift to give to Herbert at the right time, and just before you leave, she asks you to give it to him.
A gift? From Scarlett? I knew it! I knew she cared! Ah!
F's in chat. The existence of Herbert and his weird creepiness makes me feel extra weird about the DLC's title. Scarlett isn't Moxxi, she doesn't flaunt her sexuality. The DLC is in no way about her arse, and the one guy who's obsessed with it is depicted as a dirty creepy weirdo whom she murders with an explosive. If she doesn't want to be objectified, why are we doing it in the title of the DLC? Anyway, compass assembled, you take it to the lighthouse which will show you the location of the treasure Indiana Jones style, but not before, for old time's time's sake, we have to wait for a comically slow lift while we fight off hordes of enemies. We activate the lighthouse, which is when the inevitable betrayal of Captain Scarlett happens. You fight off her men, you make it to the location of the treasure, only to be eaten by its guardian, the Leviathan. You have a boss fight with Captain Scarlett inside the beast with her and her pet rat hive, but she runs off before you can kill her, and finally you fight the Leviathan itself before collecting the big pile of treasure. Roll credits. If you cut the pirate stuff, the plot of this DLC is almost a shot-for-shot remake of the first game. It has more talking in it, that's for sure, but we're all the way back to killing a guy to grab a mysterious thing storytelling here. Switch the vault key with the compass and the vault with the treasure of Captain Blade, and it's the same, even with the same third act betrayal. Why? Why are we doing this again? It's a massive step backwards from the intricate character work of the base game, and the drive for the player to even complete this DLC is very low. I didn't at the time it came out. I gave up on all the DLC for years, basically until the pre-sequel came out, because I couldn't be bothered finishing the DLC. I think they vastly overestimated the lure of a big pile of loot. Big piles of loot are all over this game. I need more than the promise of treasure to get me through this narrative. It worked for Borderlands 1 because Borderlands 1 is about collecting loot, and the vault was well established and built up. The lost treasure of Captain Blade is just a bunch of chests left by some guy. Borderlands 2 has the same gameplay, but it's built differently. It's built to tell a bigger, more intricate story than this. Going back to the rhythms of Borderlands 1 feels old and outdated. The only part of the DLC that going back to this story structure fixes is side questing. In the base game, side quests are good, but they often feel so tangential and so out of place with the main story. Because the main story was given an actual structure with tension and a ticking clock, and going off to help logins with an increasingly silly Top Gun reference quest feels out of place. Here, just like the first game, you're free to go off and do that stuff because the narrative has no ticking clock. You're hunting, but the treasure's not going anywhere until you find it. None of the side quests are that worthwhile, though. There's a series of quests to help Shade do menial and pointless tasks to indulge the delusion that his dead friends are alive. There's some quests for the chef aboard Scarlett's ship. There's some quests to help the granddaughter of a famous pirate destroy the evidence of her grandma's crimes, which are a bit more fun. The best amongst them are the messages and bottles, which point to less well-hidden treasure of Captain Blade. Mechanically, they're as simple as looking for the X which marks the spot, but in the end you get an audio log filling in some of the history of the man himself. He's an interesting guy, it turns out. It's revealed through these logs that his persona is completely fake. He was a pacifist by nature, and he wasn't a pirate for the joy of crime, but for the security and safety of travelling as a pack. When his crew found out, they tried to kill him, and he intended to let them, but it turned out that his fight or flight response was stronger than he expected. So he killed them all, and he hid the treasure before disappearing into the sands. He's a bit like Mr. Shank, except without the homophobic undertones.
I think the men are starting to unravel. They want to kill stuff. They want to split the loot and head their separate ways. They don't seem to get the fact that our whole operation isn't about greed and bloodlust. It's about survival. We start robbing ships, we starve. We split up, we die. I won't let that happen.
Captain Scarlett and her pirate's booty is not the worst thing ever. I've probably come across as more negative than I actually feel about it. It's low on my list, but it's nowhere near the endless pain that was the Underdome. It's fine. It's got some good jokes. It's apparently got great loot, but I've never been fussed about that sort of thing. It's just this strange look backwards, when Borderlands should be looking forwards.
I'm Torgue, and I'm here to ask you one question, and one question only. Explosions?
Okay, not my smoothest transition, I'll grant you, though it's not incorrect. Mr. Torgue's campaign of Carnage has a very different approach compared to Pirate's Booty. Functionally, the structure of these DLCs are extremely similar. Jump through a bunch of hoops so you can open the big pile of treasure. But in execution, they couldn't be more different. If I had to pick one word to describe Campaign of Carnage, it would be f*** it. That's 2 words, but if you're questioning that, you're not in the spirit of f*** it yet. This DLC is the most outwardly comedic Borderlands has yet gotten. There's almost no tension in the plot, and what little there even could be is immediately undercut by jokes. It might be annoying if it wasn't successful at it, but it is. Make or break for this DLC is its title character, Mr. Torgue, who is, without a doubt, one of the funniest characters in the series. He's a recognisable trope, the big bodybuilder who loves trucks, beer and women, but he's that recognisable guy cranked up to 11. He belts out every single line of dialogue at full volume, and every line is instantly quotable.
Notice that everyone here's trying to kill you. Torgue personnel included. You're welcome. I didn't want you to get bored, so I was like, fuck it, give everybody guns. We lost half of our workforce in 3 days, but who gives a fuck? Pyro Pete dead. You're now the number 4 badass on Pandora. Grats, motherfucker. Also, you should treat Moxxi nice. Nothing is more badass than treating a woman with respect. Fucking disorganized as shit. I was busy suplexing a shark wearing a bolo tie when I should have been setting up sponsors. You may ask, who was wearing the bolo tie? You or the shark? Answer, yes.
Torgue is the reason this DLC has no tension, but in a good way. The best example is when you're coming up to the first boss and he belts out at the top of his lungs exactly what's about to happen.
You finished Pyro Pete's bullshit. Now go talk to him and he'll probably tell you he's gonna give you a sponsor. But then he'll betray you and try to kill you, and you'll have to kill him, and it will be awesome! Anything you want to add, Pete?
No. You, covered it. Thanks for that.
You are welcome!
It's not like you didn't know what was going to happen anyway, so Torgue bellowing it all out in his eagerness is just funny. I mean, yeah, comedy is subjective, etc, etc, and if you don't like Torgue, this DLC is going to be a real challenge for you. It's not that this DLC would be bad without Torgue, but it would be thoroughly average without him. His constant commentary has the DLC shooting way higher than it has any right to, because story-wise, well, if the last DLC was our weird genre mashup like Zombie Island, then we've just hit our Underdome. Here's the situation. Another vault has been found. This one will open when the biggest hero on Pandora spills the blood of the biggest coward. Seems extremely weird and out of place for the mysterious alien forebears to do, but whatever, we'll just go with it. Spirit of f*** it and all that. Mr. Torgue, the CEO of the Torgue Corporation, has decided that this is awesome, and he's set up a tournament to find Pandora's #1 badass. And in honour of that mission, he has renamed the region to the Badass Crater of Badassitude, just in case there was any question if you were supposed to take this seriously. To stay in the running, you need a sponsor, and #1 on the leaderboard, a guy called Piston, offers to take you under his wing.
Is it just me, or does it seem like he's gonna betray the fuck out of you?
After a qualifying match, he does indeed betray the fuck out of you, and you're branded a coward. Technically, you are number 5 on the list now, though, so Torgue sends you to fight number 4, who also conveniently has an ideal sponsor held captive. You take down the boss and rescue the sponsor, none other than Moxxi herself, cementing this DLC as a sequel to Underdome. Moxxi then introduces you to your new trainer, Tiny Tina. Pirate's Booty had almost no returning characters. Sir Hammerlock and Scooter each show up to give you a side quest, but other than that, it's an all-new cast. This DLC, and all the DLCs going forward, basically until we hit Bounty of Blood in Borderlands 3, are all about returning characters. I don't mind it. Moxxi has a very minor role in Borderlands 2. She has one major side quest in the base game, where you help her destroy a part of Opportunity Jack was building a new arena in to spite her, because they used to date, and she shows up in some other side quests too. Here she gets to step more into the spotlight, and her gentle speech and clever innuendo clash brilliantly with Torgue's loud frankness, as after her rescue she starts to co-host the tournament with him. Tina too, she's actually a tiny part of the base game, a tiny Tina part of the base game, but she has one main mission and one side mission chain where you help her throw a tea party as a front for torturing and punishing the guy who killed her parents. She has the exact same manic energy here too, but if you enjoy that about her, then this DLC just brings more of it. Her training involves eating cookies, but when it turns out they're raisin cookies, she has you destroy them all. I mean, I get it. It's fun seeing these characters interact, too. There's an exchange between Moxxi and Tina later on, and their personalities clash in interesting ways.
So yeah, I heard of this flyboy guy. He's a noob. Just stick to the fundamentals I taught you and you're gonna be ace.
What fundamentals? Eat lots of cookies?
Shut the hell up, Moxxi! You don't understand my process? I take it back, girl. You know I love you. You forgive me?
I guess. Sure, whatever.
There's a similar moment between Hammerlock and Scooter in one of the side missions as well. There wasn't space for these kinds of interactions in the base game, so using the DLC to do that sort of thing is fun. And it is enough to carry this DLC through what has to be some of the dullest environments and quest objectives in the whole game. The badass creator of Badassitude may have a fun name, but it is so generically Borderlands. It wouldn't look out of place at all in Borderlands 1, the same desert and long windy roads and old buildings. The Rust Yards is a ringer for the same environments as the scrap heaps around New Haven. The one exception is the Beatdown, a large urban area of condensed streets and rundown buildings. That's new. The rest, not so much. The actual tournament is structured better than Underdome Riot, though that's like saying being nicked with a butter knife is better than being stabbed with a chainsaw. There's 4 bosses on your way to the top, and before you can reach each of them, you have to complete a mini combat arena with its own objectives. For the first one, Pyro Pete, it's a bar brawl, which is fair enough. For the second, Motor Mama, it's a race. Against the clock. Well, this is just thrilling. For the third boss, Flyboy, you need to shoot down some buzzards and grab some stuff that they're flying about with. The main story only gives you the first tier of each of these, but there's multiple tiers of each with escalating difficulty. Your primary reward for doing these is Torgue tokens that can be exchanged at new Torgue vending machines, which only give you Torgue guns. But they do give you good Torgue guns, even legendaries, so if you like Torgue guns, this is pretty good. If, like me, you only really find Torgue shotguns worthwhile, this is pretty pointless. The bosses themselves are at least quite fun, especially Motor Mama, who's a delightfully nice and cheerful cannibal.
I'm so glad you could make it. I'm gonna kill you and make sandwiches out of your corpse.
Apparently she used to be one of Moxxi's girlfriends until she ate another one of Moxxi's girlfriends.
Oh, did I mention we dated for a while? Had to break it off when she devoured one of my other girlfriends alive. Nobody eats my lady friends but me. Oh, God. Too far. That was in bad taste. Vomited in my mouth a little bit.
The big bad of the DLC is Piston, the guy who tricked you at the start. The twist that isn't really a twist at all is that he's Pandora's biggest coward. He continually blocks your progress because he doesn't want to fight you, and when he eventually has to, he does it inside a giant robotic Tyrannosaurus. He's not the strongest villain. His character mostly consists of showboating about how strong he is and insisting that he's not a cheater. He doesn't really need to be a strong villain though. He just needs to be an annoying asshole in your way. And I mean, the giant robot Tyrannosaurus is very cool. Does it make sense? Not really. But embrace the spirit of f*** it. This DLC drops any pretense that this needs to make sense or do anything but make you laugh. It'll just point out that something doesn't make sense and make a joke about it. It's not the kind of tone that could sustain a full game, but as an individual DLC it works great. Visually it's not nearly as good as Pirate's Booty, but the script is so much more memorable. We're a million miles away from Herbert and his creepy love poems. Campaign of Carnage recognises that the Borderlands setup, kill a guy and grab a thingy your way to the top, is inherently not very tense, and it uses that lack of tension as an advantage to make you laugh instead. The ideal scenario would be the best of both worlds, a funny and memorable script combined with an interesting and diverse location, which is exactly what the next DLC would try to deliver.
Danger! Excitement! Moustaches! It's time for another episode of Vault Hunter Adventures featuring Sir Hammerlock.
I emphasise try. They definitely tried. Following our pattern, we should now be on Secret Armory, the big one, the follow-up to the main story, the one that shakes things up and redefines the series. Sir Hammerlock's big game hunt is certainly more directly tied to the base game than the previous 2 DLCs, but it's not a follow-up in the same way Secret Armory was. Borderlands 2 was a pretty concrete game. It did not leave much room for follow-ups. It left no threads hanging, which presents a problem for any future content to deal with. So Big Game Hunt is more of a weird thing that happens afterwards than a direct follow-up like Secret Armory. and it's also not as good. The setup is right for a spot of hunting with your old pal Sir Hammerlock. However, the fun is interrupted by a gang of savages led by a guy called Professor Nakayama. The professor is out here attempting a secret plan to clone Handsome Jack. You may have noticed a few issues in that summary. Me too. We'll get to it. I'll start us on a positive first. We're finally out of the desert. This DLC is instead set in a mountainy swamp region, which on its own wouldn't be amazing and revolutionary, but after 2 deserts in a row, it's very nice to have a swap in colour palette. We're back to more interesting enemy designs too. The savages are... but at least they have new combat rhythms, especially the witch doctors, which are a right pain to fight. They come in different flavours, which can do different annoying attacks, and they can also self-heal and level up nearby allies. When you see one on the field, you need to go after them first. They're fun mechanically, it's just that word, isn't it? Do we really have to call them savages?
Barely even human!
Everyone seems to have at least one NPC in Borderlands that they just can't stand. For some people it's Claptrap, for some people it's Tina, and for a surprising amount of people it's Sir Hammerlock. I don't mind him. People say his accent sounds fake, but sounds fine to me.
Hello. Things need to be shot, and by Jove, you're the one to shoot them.
He's a specific type of character, that posh British explorer. Pip pip, what ho? You know the type. And as that, he mostly exists to take light jabs at that sort of person. Like a mission in the base game where he asks you to study bullymongs and come up with a better name for them, getting increasingly frustrated that all the good names are already taken. He's fine because he's a side character on a planet that's already filled to the brim with people. Now we're entering his world, and things are starting to get a little bit uncomfortable. There's a reason this kind of figure is the butt of jokes. It reaches back to the history of these posh British nobles researching and discovering places like Africa and Australia, where people already lived, and all of these things they discovered had already been known about for hundreds of years. That's partly what the Bullymong quest is making fun of. As seen by the opening, this DLC is going all in on that spiffing adventurer aesthetic. We're off to a new continent to explore and to hunt and to gun down the savages that already live there. The savages are dressed in big masks and come at you with spears and war paints from their huts. I give Gearbox too much benefit of the doubt. But this is just completely tone deaf, especially since most of the savages appear to be black, when all the bandits in the base game are white. Why'd you have to do that, Gearbox? 1. Earth were you thinking? Sir Hammerlock himself is black, which I guess is supposed to defang this kind of criticism, but that's literally the I have a black friend argument. It doesn't cancel out the weird racist thing you're doing. Besides, all of the player characters are white. Salvador is Spanish. Spanish is not a race. In fact, Spain was just as bad as the Brits. Like I said, you're not here for any kind of noble purpose. One falls in your lap, but you're here for sport hunting, and the native people who live here are being positioned as an annoying obstacle in the way of your fun. There's another side quest that I think is also meant to take the sting out, where one of the savages gives you a quest to hunt down rare animals. He opens talking in gibberish, then realises you don't speak the native language, so he gives you the quest in English instead. Don't worry, the game says, these people aren't actually crazy. They want to kill you of their own free will, so don't feel bad about gunning all of them down. Somehow that doesn't make me feel any better. The real savages weren't actually savages either. They were people with their own languages and culture and civilization. Things that those old rich fops were much less interested in than the resources they could claim from their land. I don't think it was deliberate, but even in 2013, Gearbox should have known better than this. I think it's the most outwardly racist thing in the entire series, saved primarily by the fact that nobody seems to remember this DLC anyway. I think the main reason for that is that sport hunting is already a pretty hard sell for a whole DLC. Pirate adventure? Sure. Arena tournament? Makes sense. Sport hunting? How do you make a plot out of sport hunting? The answer is you don't. You hijack the DLC with a different plot, but they still tried to sell the DLC on sport hunting. It's called Big Game Hunt. To its credit, the DLC does have plenty of hunting in it. It's just that it's boring and forgetful hunting. The main feature of coming to a new continent should be a whole host of new animals to fight. Borderlands 2 was already pulling heavy duty on the weird alien animals, with all the returning ones from the old game, plus new additions like the 4-armed gorilla-type bullymongs and the extremely annoying cloaking stalkers. Well, let's see. This DLC adds a big chitinous bug thing and a big armoured scorpion. It also brings back the big spindly drifters from Secret Armory. There, see, there's a connection after all. But primarily the new animals you're fighting are 2 new types of big bugs. All of the legendary beasts you're sent off to fight in quests are just reskinned versions of animals you've already fought 50 times already, maybe with an extra gimmick if you're lucky. It's just an astounding lack of creativity. With one exception, the giant spores. They're weird, they look completely alien, they're fun. Why isn't more of this DLC like them? There's one saving grace of this DLC, and that's its antagonist, Professor Nakayama. The story of this DLC is very short, especially compared to the last two, but it easily has the most memorable antagonist. Nakayama is a big nerd who was obsessed with Handsome Jack. After his death, he went a bit loopy and came to this continent to hide and bring Jack back, but his ship crashed when his stowaway accidentally did a bit of sabotage. When you first arrive, he sends his followers out to kill you. Sure, you must be here to stop his evil plans. And when it turns out you really are just here for a spot of hunting, he gives you a desperate plea for you to come and fight him.
What? Come on! You guys fight me already? Please.
Nakayama has anti-charisma. He's so unthreatening and so uncharismatic that he comes full circle and becomes really entertaining in that way. He's a terrible villain, his plans are easily dealt with, and he's in way over his head. As you get closer to unravelling his plans, he's clearly absolutely terrified of you.
Okay. I'm honestly scared out of my mind right now, but you still haven't totally stopped me. I've got a backup lab on my ship, complete with one last sample of Jack's DNA and the most dangerous genetic monstrosity Pandora's ever seen. The only way to truly stop me is to come to my ship and kill me. Wait, why did I tell you that?
What a rubbish evil genius you are. Good God, man, show some backbone. Throw some sarcastic taunts at us or something.
What? No! The Vault Hunter just killed a bunch of my guys and now they're gonna ruin my planet! I'm scared out of my mind!
And when you finally reach him after destroying his weird Jack monster, he falls down the stairs before the boss fight starts. He's great and he's memorable, and clearly somebody agreed because the villain of this obscure middle DLC shows up again in the pre-sequel and in Tales. What would end up being the lasting legacy of this DLC more than Nakayama though would be its reincorporation of Handsome Jack. The way this DLC uses Handsome Jack feels symbolic of what would follow after. Following the DLC, Jack returns in the pre-sequel, and Tales, and Borderlands 3. The franchise cannot seem to move away from this guy. His shadow looms so large, and the way this DLC plays with that legacy feels oddly prescient. Nakayama has an obsession with him, and so do the natives, as they've been somehow convinced to worship Jack and Hyperion, including Claptrap, who makes a guest appearance in this DLC too, this time being worshipped as a god, until he insults Handsome Jack, of course. The DLC is about a guy who cannot accept Jack's death, and that just hits too close for the franchise as a whole. His increasingly weird attempts to bring Jack back as big monsters rings true for the games going forward. He even reappears again in the next DLC. We've hit a low point. Sir Hammerlock's big game hunt isn't awful, not even with its racism, but it might be something worse. It's bland. It has some fun moments, but overall it's so easily forgotten, something which none of Borderlands has been so far. Really though, while these DLCs have been decent enough, none of them have lived up to the standard set by Borderlands 2. They're all a sharp drop from the base game, the opposite story to Borderlands 1, where the DLCs surpassed the base game in many ways. These feel more like typical DLC packs, some fun side adventures of no real consequence. Borderlands 2 seemed to be losing its era-defining edge. Until now.
Unless we make a stand, here and now, we gonna die. Now. Roll for initiative!
We've had our genre mashup, had our arena battle, had our main story continuation. Kind of. Now it's time for the wild card. But where Claptrap's new robot revolution was a weird novelty joke taken too far, Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep is one of the best DLC packs ever made. I don't mean for Borderlands, I mean across all games. Assault on Dragon Keep feels about twice the size of the previous DLCs. It has entirely new assets, an entirely new setting with entirely new enemies. It's almost a whole other game, and as I was writing this video, that almost disappeared. The DLC was repackaged and sold separately under a slightly new name as part of the promotion for the upcoming Wonderlands, which is an expansion of this DLC to a full game's scope. I don't know if it does quite justify a solo release, but it did come with new achievements, so of course I bought it anyway. That's the footage you're seeing right now. So what's all the fuss about, eh? One of the best DLCs of all time? Why? What's the deal? Here's the premise. Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep is a fictional game being played within Borderlands. It's called Bunkers and Badasses, but it's very much Dungeons and Dragons. You're playing out what the Dungeon Master and players are describing. That might sound complicated at first, but it's quite easy to follow when you're actually in it. For example, early on you enter the main town and Lilith wants you to go and talk to the villagers. So you get a quest objective to go and talk to the villagers. You are essentially acting as her token on the board. The DM is of course Tiny Tina, and the players are Brick, Lilith and Mordecai, the remaining Vault Hunters from the first game. The DLC essentially has two stories then, both going at once. There's the surface level, the story being told by Tina as DM, and then the layer above of the DM and the players playing the game. Shifting from sci-fi to fantasy might seem weird, but it actually works way better than it should. As it turns out, a fantasy setting with the Borderlands art style looks amazing. There's an insane amount of work on display, more than anything we've seen in these DLCs by a long shot. A whole new range of fantasy enemies, skeletons, trends, knights, orcs, dwarves, wizards and dragons, and of course, my favourite, jump scare mimics. All of the new locations look fantastic, each drawing from a specific type of fantasy location. Dwarven mines and enchanted forests and medieval fortresses. There's no attempt at realism, the entire world is imaginary, so if something seems weird or out of place, it's not actually weird at all, because the whole DLC is a game within a game. For example, there's an early quest where an NPC gives you a riddle to solve. Tina asks the players to roll an intelligence check, and Brick slams his dice too hard on the board, breaking the figurine. In your reality, you see this NPC being crushed by an enormous dice that fell out of the sky. But it goes bigger than that. The actual world will change according to the things being said. For example, at one point, Mr. Torgue calls in and asks Tina to put him in the game, so the character you were talking to disappears and transforms into Mr. Torgue. Or on an even bigger scale, when you enter some areas, things like this will happen.
You enter the Forest of Tranquility!
Tranquility? Boring.
Okay, good point. Dang, now I gotta come up with a better name for the forest.
The effect and atmosphere is so different and so cool that it's extremely easy to get lost in it. After a while in the DLC, you completely forget that this is the same game as Lynchwood and Opportunity. The base game feels a million miles away from us now. Even in a fantasy setting though, it's definitely still Borderlands. The vibe is still there, the blend of jokey and serious that defines the series, just translated to a fantasy setting. Like the place names, I got a giggle out of the Generally Hospital back in Zombie Island, but Dragon Keep is on a whole other level. We've got the Hamlet of Swift Passing Through, or the Forest of Being Eaten Alive by Trees, or my personal favourite, Camp Dwarf Torture. I think the best example is references. Borderlands loves references, and there is plenty in this DLC, like a quest to help a forlorn traveller light bonfires and collect souls, or a mission from Torgue to go farm a boss with a group of other players, then make the other players rage quit so you can get the loot to yourself. But the most interesting by far is the quest to slap King Jeffrey, because the quest uses the game within a game premise to get meta about making references. Gearbox isn't the one making an elongated Game of Thrones reference, Tina is the one making an elongated Game of Thrones reference. This is back during Season 3 when Game of Thrones was still the new hotness and not a forgotten disappointment. Remember those days? You make it to Jeffrey's court with the throne made of melted down guns and you slap him to make references come out.
I'm sorry I cut off Mr. Sean's head, alright? I'm sorry! You can't slap a king! May your hand fall from your wrist! I'm joking! My mother and uncle are just good friends, that's all!
That is, until Tina runs out of references. Instead of looping the dialogue like normal, the dialogue stops and Tina explains that she's done all her references. She only actually watched the show the one time. Mordecai doesn't get the references at all and gets increasingly annoyed by the others talking about it. When you finish the quests, he demands that Tina reference something he knows, and the game flips the script on you by having Tina and Mordecai geek out over a show that you know nothing about.
Last night, one of my servants inadvertently put too much salt on my chicken. The gall, the unmitigated gall.
Ugh, show's so good.
I know, right?
You guys are dorks.
I mean, it's probably a reference to something, but it ain't something I know. Honestly, I think that's better. It's a great self-aware quest about the game's own tendency to rely on references, showing some sympathy for the folks who don't get the jokes. Maybe the biggest fantasy twist of all is that your character speaks now.
Whoops. What I meant to say is, it's eternal night, and you hear spooky music, and the whole area kind of smells like butts and dead people.
I smell butts and dead people.
Very, very occasionally.
Oh man, impossible puzzles, hairy dwarves, fiery explosions, best day ever!
It's odd. I'm not sure I'd even say you're not still a silent protagonist. You're like a silent protagonist that says things randomly that don't affect the plot in any way. You don't talk to anyone. The best way to describe it is that there are certain trigger points in the story where the character will speak a line of dialogue. The most obvious one is here, when Tina says that you'll think about what you'll spend your prize money on.
With the Sorcerer's Tower in sight, you think of what you're going to spend your reward money on once you rescue the Queen.
Maybe some guns. And a hacker circuit reintegrator. Those things are neat!
They're not really placed for natural flowing dialogue. You still get talked at, though this time that's less of a problem given that the DLC players talk for you. They're in here, I think, to backfill some characterization into these protagonists, which they certainly do.
Kinda smells like butts and dead people.
Hey, this area smells vaguely of butts and death. An unpleasant stench.
This area kind of smells like butts and dead people.
Hey, this area kind of smells like butts and dead people.
Smells like home.
It's a strange half-step between voiced characters and silent protagonists that I've never really seen any other game do, but at the very least, it's a step in the right direction. Especially for Krieg.
That'll crack your mind and beat your problems to death.
A standalone release of this DLC makes sense from a marketing sense. Drum up some hype for Borderlands by refreshing people's memory of the original. From an artistic perspective though, it's very hard to separate Dragonkeep from Borderlands 2. The story is essentially a very rough retelling of the main game from Tina's perspective in a fantasy setting, with Handsome Jack replaced with the Handsome Sorcerer. And for a lot of the deeper meaning of the DLC to be clear, you really need to be familiar with the base game. The standalone release tries to make up for this by including an extra cutscene recapping the plot of the main game, but I don't know how successful that'll be in getting new players invested, because some way or no, this is a very bad place to start. It's filled to the brim with references and callbacks that you need to have played the game beforehand to understand at all. It's very much designed as the final DLC. On the one hand, the DLC is about playing D&D, with each of the three players taking on a typical D&D player role. Lilith is the long-time player, the professional, the fan. Brick is the eager newbie. He's never played before, but he's into it. Mordecai is the reluctant newbie. He thinks all of this is silly and a waste of time, and the DLC is about the journey of discovering that they like this game. The end of the intro cutscene, however, hints at the other element of this DLC.
Come on, girl, you know we gotta wait for Roland before we start.
Tina, Roland's not coming, right? He's not here anymore.
Yeah, he's probably running late or something.
Yes, on top of everything else this DLC is about grief and accepting loss. And it works. As Game Master and title character, Tina is obviously key to this DLC. She has been noticeably turned down a bit. The same character, but a little bit less loud than previous appearances. But the bigger difference is that the DLC gives her an emotional arc which she desperately needed. A lot of Borderlands NPCs can come off as quite one note. They can be fun, but they're always the same. They're quite simple characters, and Tina was no exception. I hinted at the Tea Party quest before, where she has you hunt down the guy who killed her parents, but even during that quest, she never really drops her manic persona. This DLC gives Tina a lot of development, primarily by finally acknowledging that she's still a kid who's been through a hell of a lot, and it does that primarily with its use of Roland. Tina's assertion that Roland is definitely coming makes all the old Vault Hunters deeply uncomfortable. None of them really know what to say to it. It's clear that none of them are, or have any desire to be parents, and yet a 13-year-old has fallen into their laps and they really don't have a choice. For the most part, everyone treats Tina like she's a tiny adult, and there's a discomfort in the clash between her outer persona and her inner kid that the adults in the room haven't the faintest idea how to deal with. It gets more uncomfortable for all of them when Roland starts showing up in the campaign. In typical Borderlands fashion, it's both uncomfortable and funny, as in Tina's world, Roland talks like Tina.
Hey, shorty, you're the best. I owe you one. This can't be healthy. You fought well, girl. I'll be honored as hell to join your quest.
Things escalate. Before each boss fight, Tina keeps bringing back Roland to help, and the Vault Hunter's discomfort slowly turns to anger as they keep telling Tina to stop, to accept his death. The rough retelling of the base game takes an interesting twist too. You get trapped in the Sorcerer's Dungeon, and a familiar voice calls to you, asking for help. When you get there, Angel turns into a horrific spider monster and tries to attack you. Angel was never redeemed in Tina's eyes. She's a villain who lured Roland into a trap. It's a clever inversion of the main story, and it is quite disturbing as she yells about how it's all her fault and she was the one to blame for all of this. It disturbs the players too.
We really have to kill the sorcerer's daughter like that? She wasn't as bad as you seem to think she was.
What? Nah, man, the sorcerer's daughter is the worst. If it weren't for her dumb butt, everything would have been fine and nobody would have died.
After finally reaching and defeating the handsome sorcerer, Tina summons Roland once more to celebrate the victory, which is when the team finally snaps at her, yelling at her that Roland is dead. Tina breaks down. She knows. But this is her fantasy, and in her fantasy, Roland can be alive. Obviously, it's a bit more symbolic than that. Just because someone's dead doesn't mean they're gone. You don't have to forget them. The handsome sorcerer makes a final surprise attack, but it's deflected. Bloodwing flies in to save the day. Story over, the DLC ends with a funeral for Roland. Tina hugs the statue and the sun sets. I think the craziest part of all this is that it's genuinely a well-done tale of a girl learning to accept the death of a parental figure, and they never interacted a single time on screen. Kind of crazy to realise that, but their entire relationship is left inferred. We've never seen any evidence of it on screen. The grief subplot and theme is good, but I think I actually prefer the more basic one a little more. The one about the characters just playing D&D. The first time I played this DLC, I had never played Dungeons & Dragons, but since then I've played it a lot, and this DLC does a fantastic job of capturing the experience of playing Dungeons & Dragons with your friends. It captures that weird vibe of everyone being interested in the story while also having fun with it and including silly jokes. Like when you first make it to the Dwarven Mines, they've been enslaved by the sorcerer and Tina suggests you should team up with their leader. However, Brick rolls the highest and he gets to do the talking.
I punch him!
Brick, don't. If you just talk to him, we can...
I punch him! Quit it!
He messes up Tina's entire plan and makes all of the dwarfs in the mine hostile, and now you have to fight through them all as well as the sorcerer's forces. It's the exact kind of silliness that happens when someone in the party is feeling a bit chaotic that day. Or there's just silly inside jokes, like how all of the aforementioned dwarves look exactly like Salvador, one of the player characters. Or just the crazy stuff that happens when you're playing D&D sometimes, like a side quest to collect a gun where the players keep rolling ones to pick it up, eventually leading to the gun turning into a monster with swords for hands. It's exactly the sort of chaos you get with a lenient dungeon master who's along for the ride. It still has all the action and fighting on your end, but the tone is so chill. There's no tension, but that's good. There shouldn't be any tension. This is just friends hanging out, playing a game. Despite the fantasy setting, Dragon Keep is a fantastic send-off to Borderlands 2. It brings everything full circle in a clever, considered, and genuinely heartwarming way, while also being funny and extremely bold and daring. A fantasy DLC for Borderlands could have gone horribly wrong, and instead it's being spun off into its own series, and it deserves it. Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep is, to this day, one of the most impressive pieces of post-launch content ever released. It would have been a fantastic place to end the game, but it wasn't. Borderlands 2 is a whole lot of game. Assault on Dragon Keep may have been the last of the major DLC packs for Borderlands 2, but they would continue supporting the game into the next year with 5 more smaller story DLC packs labelled as Headhunters for reasons I don't understand, as well as a max level raid mode DLC called the Raid on Digistruct Peak. Raid on Digistruct Peak is very much designed for 4 max level players who care about things like builds and bringing the right guns, which is very much not me, so I really can't say much about it. It's there if you're that sort of player, but I am not, so I'm going to skip it. Sue me. Instead we'll go through the Headhunters. Each of them are about an hour long, and each of them are holiday themed. The first of which is TK Baha's Bloody Harvest, the Halloween DLC. We're continuing the trend of weirdly high effort into these smaller expansions. This area looks great. It takes the Scooby-Doo Halloween aesthetic of Zombie Island and goes all in. It blends a little bit of the Dragon Keep aesthetic in there too, though this DLC is very much supposed to be set on Pandora, even though it has magic reanimated skeletons that fight you, and the main boss is a magic evil pumpkin man. Yeah, they weren't too fussed about canonicity on this one. The real highlight of this DLC for me though is the return of TK Baha as a zombie mind, which I could do without, but he's not the most threatening zombie. He's just incessantly upbeat and friendly, which I appreciate.
So then, after Lilith and all them killed Dr. Ned, I decided I'd come back here to unlive out the rest of my days. Thought about going to Sanctuary with all them Crimson Raider fellas, but I didn't want to mess with Candy.
He has a brief return in the base game when you visit his old house on the behalf of his niece who suspects Hyperion of plagiarising his gun designs, but it's nice to see him in the flesh once again, even if it is non-canonical zombie flesh. He's your guide through this strange Halloween adventure. The local people of Hallowed Hollow, the only haven for the undead on Pandora, are being harassed by a mean old pumpkin called the Pumpkin Kingpin, and you need to stop him. He locks himself away, and so you need to forge a magical skeleton key from enchanted bones at the Forge Master's hammer. It's ridiculous Halloween goofiness with no attempt to connect to the wider Borderlands story, and that's fine. Holiday-themed goofiness is what all of these headhunters shoot for. They're only about 30 minutes to an hour apiece, so they're short and quick bursts of extra content for seasonal fun. Next up on the calendar was of course Thanksgiving, so for Thanksgiving there was the horrible hunger of the ravenous Wattle Gobbler, and it's Thanksgiving with Mr. Torgue in his weirdest appearance so far. You see, this is the story of you helping Mr. Torgue kill a giant invincible turkey so that he can eat it. Visually, this headhunter isn't nearly as cool as the previous DLC, mostly because it's a big industrial kitchen, though it does have the courtesy to dress up the bandits like chefs. However, the script has the last one beat, because Mr. Torgue is still a delight. He's not quite as good in this as he was in his own DLC or Dragon Keep, but he still has his moments.
That door's locked! Let me activate my remote lockpicking program!
Better though is how this Thanksgiving DLC manages to flesh him out a bit. It introduces a new character, President Smith of the Torgue Corporation, who reveals some of Torgue's backstory. As it turns out, Torgue is really more of a figurehead than an actual CEO. Not exactly a shock, as he doesn't seem the office type. He did design the explosive weapons, but he sold the technology to the company for $12 and a high five. They kept him on for PR reasons, but now Smith is tired of his nonsense and wants him gone, so he sends the other contestants to kill you, or rather, tributes, because on top of all the weirdness already in this DLC, it's also an elaborate Hunger Games reference. It was 2013, a simpler time. Helping Torgue poison and kill a big turkey is half the DLC. The other half is Grandma Flexington, Mr. Torgue's gran. Torgue asks you to say hello and you end up stuck listening to her rambles for almost 10 minutes. You can't leave or she'll get offended, and you can't zone out because she quizzes you.
Hey, what's my favorite flavor of ice cream? Oh, so you are listening, how wonderful. You're an even better listener than my old pet rack, Beasto. Beasto was such a sweetie. You ever had a pet rack?
Once you're done that, you can play Raid mode where she'll talk to you for 20 whole minutes.
Actually, that reminds me, now that you're here, I wanted to throw some ideas at you for feedback. I'm a playwright in my spare time, and I'm trying to write a story about an up-and-coming tournament fighter who tries to find love in a gladiatorial arena. And I figure you've got a lot of experience, so your feedback could really be valuable.
On the one hand, I get the joke. Old ladies talk a lot. Great. On the other hand, that is insanity. Grandma Flexington has more dialogue than any other NPC in the game, possibly the entire series. Why did they do this?
Must I be destined to spend my life as the strongest, the bravest, the most invincible warrior this galaxy has seen? For I am Valkyrie, scourge of the gladiatorial games! Excellent Valkyrie, as she shakes her head in despair. From stage left, enter Noda, a janitor with a heavy heart and an even heavier conscience. He begins sweet. Oh no, you're leaving? I won't take up any more of your time then.
As a final note, it disturbs me that for her model they didn't shave Mr. Torgue's mustache, they just painted its skin colour. Disturbing. On to brighter things now, because it's Christmas time. Or or as it's called in the Borderlands universe, Mercenary Day. And this is the story of how Marcus saved Mercenary Day. I've never been a big Marcus fan. His greedy salesman shtick never really did it for me. I don't dislike him, I'm just ambivalent on him. And this DLC isn't really going to change my mind, because this DLC is peak Marcus. What it does do is fill me with Christmas cheer, as it's a wonderful Christmas land. You're off to the town of Gingerton to find out why they haven't received Marcus's shipment of guns. As it turns out, the townspeople were frozen. What monster could be responsible for such a thing? Why, a giant evil snowman named Mr. Tender Snowflake, of course. Who else? Yeah, we're back to questionable canon here, but this is simple Christmas fun. And what is Christmas without shooting some evil snowmen? The weirder part of this is that during this obviously non-canonical Christmas romp, they try to inject some actual lore and world building, like how apparently Mercenary Day was a promotional event created by Dahl, where for one day all mercenary operations were free, but the residents of Pandora took it and made it Christmas. Or the little snippet Marcus gives you that he's overweight intentionally because it makes people underestimate him, an idea he picked up from Moxxi. The weirdest one is that after you've defeated Mr. Tender Snowflake and knocked off his magic hat, you get a second quest from smaller than average Timothy here to deliver some presents from Hyperion. Naturally, the presents are traps because the residents of Gingerton are all ex-slabs, Brick's bandit gang from all the way back in the base game.
I suppose I understand why they wanted us dead. Gingerton is full of ex-slabs, and Hyperion was never fond of anyone who followed Brick.
That's great, Timothy. Hey, I just killed a giant snowman. Is now really the best time to try and convince me that Gingerton is a real place on Pandora with a genuine backstory? Tell you what though, the music for this DLC slaps way harder than it has any right to. Also, this DLC comes with the woolly jumper skin for Krieg, which obviously makes it the best DLC ever. Initially, they had only planned 3 headhunters, Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas, to wrap up the year, but they ended up doing 2 more, and you can kind of tell there's a little bit more effort put into these last 2, and they feel a little bit more connected to the base game than before. Next up is Valentine's Day for Mad Moxxi and the Wedding Day Massacre. Moxxi has arranged a wedding between the Zafford and Hodunk clans to secure peace between the two. It's a callback to a long series of side missions in the base game where you help Ellie engineer a war between the 2 clans because they're both kinda jerks. Both of them kinda end up falling into weird stereotypes. The Hodunks are southern hicks who love women and cars, and their boss is an old coot who speaks in unintelligible gibberish. And the Zaffords are Irish, and all the most top of the morning till you let me get me whiskey. They're after me Lucky Charms, what you'd expect from someone who only knows Ireland via St. Patrick's Day.
You gonna help me get them hodunk bastards? Good. If there's anything they love more than getting to second base with their sisters, it's cars. I want you to get out there and ruin their race. Come into my basement.
It's also revealed that Moxxi and her kids used to be a part of the Hodunks until old Jimbo asked her to kill someone on threat of making Ellie the clan wife?
Jimbo told Moxxi to kill some dude or they was gonna turn me into the clan wife. She wasn't having none of that.
Yikes. The missions start simple but keep escalating. Blow up their race cars, steal their money, burn their homes with them still inside, shoot up their wake. Eventually the last mission you have to pick a side that you want to win. The semi-offensive Irish stereotypes or the semi-offensive Hick stereotypes, who are also canonically a bit rapey. Doesn't seem like much of a choice to me, to be honest. Anyway, here in the DLC the weird stereotypes are still in full swing, but the DLC has other saving graces. Moxxi and Ellie don't have much interaction in the base game, though it's made clear through audio logs that they have a very strained relationship, specifically with Moxxi trying to pressure Ellie into losing weight. Here they get into various arguments about how to handle the situation. Moxxi wants to stop the gangs from fighting with a marriage, while Ellie is team just kill them all. The happy couple aren't so happy, and so Moxxi suggests brewing a love potion to keep the wedding on. You'll need something new, something old, something borrowed, and something gold. Ellie has an idea for knocking off 2 at once. A baby! Obviously, if you steal a baby, that's new and borrowed. Stealing a baby angers some of the folks nearby, naturally, so you end up shooting everyone anyway. something old and something gold you can get at the Zafford distillery nearby, but to get in you must enlist the help of Ed, a loader who's been locked out and wants to get in to save his girlfriend, but he has pre-programmed self-esteem issues, so you need to give him some words of encouragement.
Honestly, if she didn't follow you out here, maybe she doesn't want to be with you. That said, I need to get inside, so you should totally save her or whatever.
That's right, you can talk again. This time you talk more than in Dragon's Keep even. We're inching closer and closer to having a voiced protagonist. You know, now 2.5 years after the game's launch, you mix together the love potion, you give it to the happy couple, then together as husband and wife they rampage and murder everyone in one of the honestly most annoying boss fights in the entire game. There's a secondary quest in the area for the priest Moxxi brought along, Innuendobot 5000, who's actually a returning character as well. He hosted the Hyperion enemy arena back in the base game. He's a loader Moxxi programmed to only speak in innuendos, but now he wishes for love. He sends you off to fetch some things to awaken his romantic side, including a blonde wig which is being worn by Ed's girlfriend Stella.
Hiya guys. Quick favor. Could I have that wig?
Oh, I'm sorry, but this wig is wired into my friend or foe subroutines. If I were to remove it, I'd go insane and probably die.
Yeah, I need that wig for a quest, so...
But it's just a side quest, right? You could just, not finish it. It's not worth, killing my girlfriend and I, is it?
Yeah, I mean, you'll still have the quest hanging around in your log, but that's not such a big deal, right?
I'm sorry! I just really wanted to complete the quest!
Isn't a protagonist that can speak fun? If only you'd done this to begin with. Anyway, the quest ends by killing Innuendobot, so I guess justice is served.
Moxxi, my love for you keeps my gears turning just as sure as that can of smelly grease. Marry me.
Vault Hunter, go kill Innuendobot.
The final Headhunter release to celebrate spring break, I guess, was Sir Hammerlock versus the Son of Crawmerax, though it could more accurately be called the beach episode, as Lilith herself points out.
I just realized, you ever watch those animated Echo series about dudes with swords? They always eventually do an episode where they just go to the beach and hang out. This is like our beach party episode, isn't it? Isn't it cool?
The plot is, you're off to a beach resort for a break. However, Hammerlock is kidnapped by a big monster called the Son of Crawmerax. Crawmerax Sr. was a big monster from the Secret Armory DLC in Borderlands 1, and he was the first in a long line of raid bosses. Another one of those big parts of the game that I've yet to mention because they are not designed for players like me. They're designed for max level player teams of 4. The Son of Crawmerax is here to get revenge on the old generations of Vault Hunters, but it'll have to settle for you instead. Of course, the Tropical Beach DLC is the perfect time to bring back the savages, right? Right, only this time we have a new tact for not making it weird and racist.
You wouldn't mind hurrying, Vault Hunter. I believe these savages are attempting to summon the Son of Crawmerax as I speak. Hey man, don't call me a savage! Oh, you speak English? I thought I graduated from E4 University with honors! Check your privilege, dick!
I can't. Where to even begin with this? There's a nostalgic flashback, eh? A check your privilege joke. I mean, again, just because this guy went to college, that doesn't magically make it okay to play into racist stereotypes. He may proclaim to be insulted by the title Savage, but the game still labels them all as savages. He's still sacrificing Hammerlock to the giant bug god. Ugh. Besides that, this DLC is fun. It's a nice check-in with everyone now that we're in a calm period. Mordecai's got a new bird and he's quit drinking to raise it, and the old crew is getting nostalgic for the Borderlands 1 days. That's their side of the DLC. The second mission is yours. You get contacted over the radio by Sparky Flint, the son of Captain Flint, the first bandit leader you killed all the way back at the start of the game. He started a support group, Victims of Vault Hunters, and he has 6 assassins, one for each player character on the island to kill you. You head out to face down the assassins, each of whom have a personal reason for wanting to kill one of the Vault Hunters based on their backstories. However, they're all dead before you get there. As it turns out, it's a wild coincidence. Each of them was killed by an ally of each Vault Hunter, and Hammerlock hands you a personalised note at the end.
Here, this message was addressed to you.
Dear Gage, Dad here. Hope Pandora is fun. Heard Marcy's dad sent some mercenaries your way, so I sabotaged their transport and... Oh my god, you are the best dad ever!
It's a nice little cherry on top of the whole experience. Not quite as thematically impactful as Dragon Keep, but it ties back to the start of the game and before with each character's backstory in a fun way, as well as getting nostalgic for the first game. It would have been a fine place to end things. But it wasn't.
Of course, sometimes when you're busy looking forward, you forget to watch your back.
Son of Crawmerax was the end of Borderlands 2 for 5 years until 2019, when, as a bit of marketing for Borderlands 3, Commander Lilith and the Fight for Sanctuary was released. However, this is no Headhunter pack, it's a 5th full DLC pack which they initially gave everyone for free, though it has a price attached to it now. It almost feels wrong to be talking about this DLC right now. In that 5-year gap, 2 more full Borderlands games were released, and this DLC is set after the events of those games, heavily incorporating tales from the Borderlands especially. I'm skipping over a lot of context and history by talking about it now, but it's not big enough to justify its own video, and it would be super out of place at the end of a Tales video. Out of place or no, it's part of Borderlands 2, and it's the definitive for real this time end of the game. If you haven't played Tales from the Borderlands or the pre-sequel, you may be a little bit lost going forward, but I'll try my best to keep everything clear. So here's what's up. It's been at least a few years since the events of Borderlands 2, and an unclear amount of time since Tales from the Borderlands, but probably at least a few months. The Crimson Raiders are looking to get Sanctuary back into space-worthy condition, but they have a few problems. Sanctuary is barely in the air as it is, and they don't have a leader as Lilith has rejected the position. That's problem enough, but a third one knocks on their door, a mysterious new faction called New Pandora, led by a guy called Colonel Hector. They've brought with them a new threat, plant zombies. They quickly seize control of Sanctuary, but Lilith is able to teleport everybody away to safety. New mission acquired: find the plant zombie cure, take back Sanctuary, and kill Hector. It's an okay enough setup for the DLC, but the opening is starting to show a few issues. Issues which are wholly new to Borderlands 2, but are emblematic of the major problems with Borderlands 3. This DLC takes a different tactic to its storytelling than the rest of the game. It has much more cutscenes and much more dialogue. It's hard to really describe it, but it just feels different. You can feel it as soon as the DLC starts. Something has changed. The vibe has changed. I can't tell you one thing for sure though, it's suddenly not as funny.
Whose soul is this?
I was already struggling to explain why Borderlands 2 was funny. Explaining how it's suddenly not funny is an extra challenge indeed. You can absolutely tell this DLC was written by different people. The dialogue just has a different character to it. It's less sharp, less witty, it relies on long monologues and much more lol, so random humour that the base game didn't really use as often. It seems to subscribe to the idea that the longer the characters talk, the funnier it gets, which isn't remotely true. I even have a clear example. Technically it's from the pre-sequel, but close enough. Here are 2 similar scenes of a machine not working and requiring a whack to fix. Hi, future editing room Kyle here. I'm very tired, I've been working on this for a long time, but as it turns out, the clip I decided to use has a glitch in it where the dialogue doesn't work properly, so I've had to improvise slightly. Access denied.
Ignore that, just smack it.
Never mind.
Oh, that's on me. Yeah, I was scanning my glutes for reasons, and I busted the science thing. Just give it a little bandit high five.
My argument kind of falls apart if you thought the second one was funnier, so if you did, just pretend you didn't for me, okay? Both of these are basically the same joke. The machine doesn't work, hit it to make it work. It's a silly bit of nothing either way, but the pre-sequel example is sharp and quick, as a silly little joke should be, where the Fight for Sanctuary example just drags on and says random things like glutes, because glutes is a funny word, right? It's longer, but it's also dumber. So goes the whole DLC. It's not completely without wit, there's still some fun stuff in there. The standout for me being a mission with Claptrap where he invents cryptocurrency.
It's working! The value of Becco wafers, which I'm totally making up, is completely off the charts! The charts are also made up! We're rich! We're filthy freaking rich!
Everyone remember this when Gearbox starts selling Borderlands NFTs. You may have noticed Claptrap sounds a little different all of a sudden. Yeah, about that. So in the years since we last saw him, David Eddings, the guy who voiced Claptrap, was fired by Gearbox CEO Randy Pitchford after years of behind-the-scenes drama, which included physically shoving Eddings before firing him in a rage 3 days later. Reportedly, the dispute revolved around Eddings wanting to be paid for, voicing the most iconic character in the franchise. Before he was doing it gratis because he was a Gearbox executive, but now that he wasn't a VP anymore, he wanted to, be paid as a voice actor. After Pitchford got mad about the situation on Twitter, things escalated so much more. Another former employee accused Pitchford of siphoning off money into his own account, and also of leaving an unprotected USB full of top-secret corporate documents and gigabytes of underage pornography in a novelty medieval restaurant. He also accused Pitchford of using company money to host peacock parties where men would expose themselves to underage girls. This is all real. I'm not making this up. Allegedly, I mean it's real, please don't sue me. Well, the parties are alleged, the porn is definitely real. Pitchford confirmed that one himself, and his defense is absolutely buck wild. Pitchford claims that he was so impressed by the camgirl's ability to fake an orgasm that he simply had to save the video for study later. Content warning? Skip forward if you don't want to hear Randy Pitchford describe porn.
So I'm going down this rabbit hole, and I'm that you see, like, there's hundreds, and they're just these little thumbnail images of different performers doing their bits, and this one is just like I can't quite make sense of what the little thumbnail image is, so I'm looking into it, and it's a woman who is masturbating, and when she has some experience that appears as if she's having an orgasm, a huge amount of fluid comes out of her vagina. She has some kind of an explosive orgasm. There was something different. It was coming out of her vagina hole. It wasn't coming out of her urethra. It was like pouring out, and also it was white. This is not a sex worker. This is a fucking magician. And so apparently what you can do is they make videos and they sell them. And so I purchased one of her videos. I wanted to watch this. I wanted to work out the method, but it was late, so I copied it over to this memory stick, and I go on my way. It turns out it was a magic trick. Like, she's like it's a combination of camera work and sleight of hand. And I never saw like a turkey baster or whatever it was that she was using to deliver the fluid.
Goods, yeah.
But there was some method here that was like, oh my god, this is genius. It was super clever. But that's not the point. The point was that I had this on the memory stick, and this was before I had learned that I should probably have password protected memory sticks.
Suffice it to say, that's gone down in the worst excuses ever Hall of Fame. Hey, fun fact, did you know that Randy Pitchford voices the weird hermit Crazy Earl, the creepy dude with the Hitler mustache? It was pretty good casting to cast the creepy weirdo as a creepy weirdo. I'm explaining all of this to you so you understand where Gearbox was at in 2019, and maybe give a little more context as to why this DLC was released for free. Gearbox's last game, Battleborn, may just be a piece of the puzzle too after they fudged that whole situation royally, but that would be too much of a diversion. I also didn't want to leave it unsaid. I love this franchise. I've heaped a ton of praise onto it so far, but by god is the behind the scenes stuff hard to hear. There's such great stuff in all these games, even Borderlands 3, and knowing that it was done under such awful conditions for such a creepy weird dude specifically is a hard pill to swallow. Anyway, I think the new Claptrap does a perfectly fine job. Let's talk about something else now. Let's talk about the other reason this DLC exists. There's a very particular reason this DLC revolves around Lilith, and that's that at this point in time, the Borderlands fanbase was not really big on Lilith, and there's a few reasons for this, some more valid than others. The fact is that even in the base game, Lilith was the least likeable of the main cast. I don't know exactly what it is, but she's just less endearing than the rest. I can't really place blame on a particular scene or line. There's just a vibe she gives off of being kind of an asshole. It actually escalates in the Tiny Tina DLC. To make her more endearing, they make it so that Lilith is secretly a big nerd. The issue is, she's really weird about it. When Mr. Torgue joins the game, she gets really gatekeepy. And there's a whole quest where you have to quiz Mr. Torgue to prove he's a true geek and not just joining because it's cool now.
Torgue, why are you even playing? We all know you aren't actually interested in nerdy stuff, muscle boy.
What? I can't like geek stuff just because I take care of my body? Discrimination!
Can we get rid of this phony already?
Lilith, you also don't look like a stereotypical nerd. You look like a supermodel. How can you possibly be doing this right now? The third strike, and easily the worst, comes at the end of the pre-sequel when she orders the execution of an unarmed and tied-up prisoner for extremely stupid reasons.
You regret teaming up with Jack?
Yes.
Now do what you will. Kill her.
What? No!
If it weren't for people like her, our friends might still be alive. Ready?
This ain't us, Lil. This ain't you!
Fire!
In 2019, she had been properly red-listed in the franchise, and Gearbox needed to fix that because she's critically important in Borderlands 3, and you really need to like her for that game's first big twist to work at all. Making you like Lilith, I cannot pronounce that name. Making you like Lilith is the primary driving force of this DLC. Yeah, other stuff happens, but really this is the please like Lilith DLC, and they bend over backwards to try and make it work. Her arc in the DLC is essentially learning to be a leader, and it's a strange one because it kind of comes out of nowhere. At the start of the DLC, she's decided she doesn't want to be the leader of the Raiders anymore, and the Raiders are crumbling because of it. But it's never really clear why she got the job in the first place. It's shown in the end credits slides that she took over, and she's clearly the boss during the current day events of the pre-sequel, but the Crimson Raiders never had a clear command structure. I always just assumed she got the job because, she wanted it. The conversation that opens the DLC is deeply weird because everyone in the room expects her to be the boss, especially Mordecai.
We need a leader.
She don't want the job, man. And can you blame her? Sometimes when you're the one calling the shots, people get hurt.
Not making a choice is still a choice.
Well, why don't you take over then, Mordecai? Why is this job anyway? It's weird, but if you can accept the premise that blah 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 has to be the boss, then it's not a terrible arc, I suppose. She learns how to take charge, how to inspire people, and how to make the tough calls. It's fine. It's even more second person than the base game, since the entirety of the plot is just about blah 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 blah, with your character basically just being her lackey and the villain barely ever talking to you directly. Plus, we're back to silent protagonists again for reasons that I did not understand, especially since Borderlands 3 has voiced protagonists. Speaking of the villain though, let's talk about him. Hector is probably the most interesting part of this DLC. He's a villain with a solid backstory and a solid goal. For his personality they went with self-important dick, which works well enough as a villain you want to punch.
In some sort of clown-themed novelty bar, enjoying weak old pizza and watered-down booze. It's a hell of a lifestyle, folks, but it made you soft. In my experience, an army rots from the top down. I led my people up from ruin, gave them something to believe in. That's why they follow me.
He and his men were part of Dahl's military, where they served in brutal conditions for many years. As a reprieve, Command gave them a post on a quiet and peaceful planet described as a paradise, a little backwater called Pandora. As it turned out, post meant underground mining, and Pandora wasn't exactly the paradise they were expecting. When Dahl pulled out of Pandora, they knew his disgruntled troops were a problem, so they caved in the mine with everyone still inside, but Hector and his men survived, and they were pissed. Hector decided that one way or another Pandora would be the paradise he was promised, and so when he met a scientist named Cassius, a returning character from Tales by the by, he concocted a plan to cause a mass acceleration of plant growth across Pandora, turning it into a lush paradise he was promised. Doing so will kill everyone on the planet, but that's a sacrifice he's willing to make, damn it. I mean, it's basically Handsome Jack's plan but with plants instead of a city, but it's fine. It works. It makes sense. The thing that makes Hector and the entire new Pandora faction weird is that their entire backstory and goal is way too similar to the Lost Legion, the primary villain of the pre-sequel, another brigade of Dahl forces who were abandoned after Dahl left and are going to kill everyone for the greater good. I don't know if they didn't see the extreme similarities or if they expected everyone else not to notice. I assume the latter, since they recycle the Lost Legion AI almost entirely for New Pandora with the exact same types of military dudes to fight. I find it really distracting because they don't even lampshade it. They don't bring up the similarities at all, despite this DLC revisiting Helios, a primary location from the pre-sequel. This DLC is filled to the brim with Tales from the Borderlands references, including 2 characters from that game, but almost nothing about the plot of the pre-sequel to be found. There is a single audio log that addresses the Athena situation, though she herself is mysteriously absent. Maybe I'm crazy. I know the pre-sequel wasn't as popular as 2, but it was definitely bigger than Tales from the Borderlands, right? I mean, it comes packaged with the Handsome collection. Did they really think nobody would notice? It gets even stranger on your return to Helios. Helios, by the way, is the big Hyperion moon base I mentioned 200 years ago when I was talking about the base game. It was destroyed and crashed onto Pandora during the events of Tales from the Borderlands. And in order to get into a secret lab/mining facility, you need to board the wreckage and use the old moonshot cannon. It would be a cool moment if everything about it wasn't wildly distracting. They use a lot of the same art and level geometry from the pre-sequel, but not in the right place, which gives the whole area this weird dreamlike quality where everything is right but wrong at the same time. Okay, prime example, you're off to load and fire the moonshot, which happens to be one of the first things you do in the pre-sequel. So it's a location we know well, and sure enough, when you get there, it's the same room as before, albeit a bit destroyed now. But then you turn right, where there should be an elevator that takes you down to a boss fight room, but there's not. There's a hallway there now. A while later, this new door opens up and you take a lift, which takes you down to a different hallway, where you end up in an entirely different room from an entirely different part of the station. It feels like going insane, and that's not even the only problem. The ruins of Helios, where you are now, already appeared in Tales from the Borderlands, in an entirely different location. They even used the moonshot cannon in Tales for a different thing. We've seen where it is. It's very much A, not in the desert, and B, has a giant flat plain in front of it where they have a Power Rangers mech fight with a rock monster. Either they just forgot, or this is a massive retcon. I mean, how did they miss that? They have 2 returning characters from that game. It's the location of the entire last episode. There's something off about the returning characters too, mainly Vaughn. He's acting weird. The game seems to have leaned way harder into the being a bandit thing than Tales ever actually did. That's a problem that'll get significantly worse in Borderlands 3, but it's definitely noticeable and weird here too. It's just like Helios, the same but wrong somehow. The whole DLC is like that even. It's the right pieces but in the wrong places. It's hard to describe, as you can tell by my struggle to describe it, but something is off about this final DLC. Something has changed. It's nothing extreme, it's still the same game of course, but it's lacking the charm, it's lacking the heart. It's a warning of things to come. Commander Lilith and the fight for Sanctuary is, more than anything else, emblematic of the issues plaguing Borderlands 3. It shares that game's love of long cutscenes, its weird quirk where your character disappears for the most important plot moments, its long, rambly, say funny words until it's funny approach to humour, its genuine lack of depth, and also its wasted potential. There's great work in this DLC, really interesting ideas, new and complex world building. There's the building blocks of a fantastic DLC in there. They're just being overshadowed by the franchise's worst impulses. It could have been a great ending to Borderlands 2, but it wasn't. Borderlands 2 is a definitive title, a landscape moment in gaming that will be remembered for decades to come. And for all its highs and lows, it is a fantastic game worthy of that legacy. It's also a game that is impossible to follow up. We've seen how its own DLCs tried and mostly failed. It would take something incredibly daring, incredibly bold, incredibly ambitious to even attempt to do such a thing. And that is exactly what they would try to do. But with ambition, with daring, comes risk. And sometimes that risk doesn't always pay off. So I hope you'll join me here for part 3. Borderlands, the pre-sequel. Too Close to the Sun. Well, that was long. This was a project that very much snowballed, shall we say. Welcome to the future, by the way. This is me post finishing the edit. It's been multiple weeks since I recorded that audio. I thought that it would be a sequential increase in time to make the video, but as it turns out, the more you add to the video, it's more of an exponential curve of increased. I don't know, I'm rambling. I felt I should chime in here at the end and say something. Clearly, if you've watched this far in the video, you probably liked it. I hope you did. It fucking took long enough. So I'm gonna break one of my rules, because this was a lot of work, and And I know it's not going to get very many views, certainly not the amount of views that should reflect the amount of work I'd put into it. But it would be nice if it got a little bit more, you know? So I'm doing a call to action. If you could please like, comment, share, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. I already did the fancy wrap up. Now I'm just here. Now I'm just gonna do the thing where I fade and I play the audio of my podcast, and we're gonna have a real good time about it. So, bye. I haven't played it. I've been busy. Believe it or not, I've been playing a lot of Borderlands recently.
You've been playing Borderlands? My god.
I know. A shock to hear, I'm sure.
I am, ladies and gentlemen. I saw Kyle playing Borderlands and I considered joining him.
You would have ruined my recording, Nathan. Gosh, no you wouldn't, but...
You would have wanted...